All right, everyone. This podcast is extra special. We sat down for an over 2.5 hour conversation with Stephen Mark Ryan. For those that are not familiar, Stephen Mark Ryan has a channel on YouTube and he's a big personality on X. He has hundreds of thousands of subscribers. He follows the tech space very closely, specifically around Tesla. But what makes this podcast very special is that we got into a very deep dive into a bunch of different topics, including freedom of speech, religion, atheism, the state of US politics, parenting, Trump derangement syndrome. We spoke about philosophy. We spoke about so many different topics. And what makes this discussion super special for me, honestly, is that we have two people, in this case, Hans and Steven, with two very different backgrounds. Hans is a Christian. Steven is an atheist. I'm an agnostic. I'm somewhere in between. But the three of us tried to tackle these very challenging topics from different viewpoints. And I think the result was very, very special. We'll make sure to put chapters in the description below, and you can also sort of find them on the Seeker here right below this video. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the first topic of the discussion, which was about parenting. It changes your perspective completely. It really does. It's sort of like the lens changes, what you focus on changes. The give a fuck meter is to zero because you're viewing everything through the lens of having a child. So it's like, okay, why am I worrying about this when the time and energy I could be spending instead should be like towards making the future better for this child, or making the present better for this child, or making the present better for my family. When you don't have a kid, it's harder to do that. At least for me, it was, because there's so many distractions, and I try to be disciplined, but I'm not the most disciplined person in the world, to be completely honest. But having a child, it gives you no other option, like, because the unconditional love you feel for this kid, who, like, that kid comes from, it's like literally a manifestation of your partner's love, right? It's like the love that you have manifests this child, and this child is fresh into the world with like zero preconceived notions, and it's just love. And you're just like, you just kind of like melt, and then all of a sudden you look around, you're like, okay, why is this world so fucked up? I don't want my kid growing up in this world. And then you go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And then you have to pause, because you'd be like, okay, this rabbit hole is a waste of time. This rabbit hole seems like a good, it's good for me to spend time learning about this, because this could really impact. But it's like hard to discern what's a good rabbit hole. It's like, it's a whole, it's been a journey, Stephen. Can you tell?
I can. I'm glad to know. Thanks for the update. And I've heard something interesting. I think you'll enjoy going through this process. Children first idolize their parents, then they demonize them, and eventually they humanize them. And that's the journey from childhood, infancy, right through to sort of teenager, where they start demonizing you. And then eventually, like, wait, we're both humans. So looking forward to hearing more about that journey from you.
Yeah, dude, it's almost like I've gone through that with my parents. Like, my relationship with my parents has changed.
Oh yeah,
ever since I've had my child. So, yeah, dude. So, yeah, but yeah, thank you for asking. How's everything with you, dude? What's going on over there?
Very well. Life is good.
Yeah. When are you moving?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to know the answer to that, but unfortunately, I am a skilled worker, and the Harris-Biden administration doesn't prioritize skilled workers. So, and everyone in front of me in line who is not a skilled worker takes priority. So I just wait and wait and wait. So I'd like to be there. Application lodged many months ago, earlier this year, but it's just a waiting game now. And of course, I have been advised it's probably not in my best interest to continue sharing my opinions on many hot topics publicly while there's a review. And I have taken that advice on board and crumpled it up and thrown it in the bin and said, thank you, but I'm not going to stop speaking my mind. I understand the risk, carry on. So there is also the outside possibility that someone gets a bit butthurt when I say maybe mutilating children's genitals is not a good idea. If the wrong person's reviewing the application at the time and they say that, well, I might not make it, but whatever.
Freedom of speech, baby. Let's see if it works. Let's see if that First Amendment actually is true, because you'd think the United States would value people that, really want to show, like, it's the clear difference between it and other countries is that First Amendment. You would think, right? As like, I don't know if that's true for like a foreigner like yourself, like viewing it from like outside in. It's like, to me, that First Amendment, that freedom of speech thing that we have going on in the United States is literally the thing that separates us from almost every other country. Other
True.
countries think they say they have freedom of speech, but they don't really. Canada, the
Hmm.
UK, wonderful countries, wonderful people, but they don't really have freedom of speech.
Yeah, you say the wrong things, you end up in jail.
Yeah, wild, crazy,
How
crazy.
is that environment in Australia? We hear a lot of crazy things about what's going on in the UK these days, but I don't really hear too many updates. I know that y'all's, I think, Prime Minister was kind of a little bit far
I think we would
left.
describe him as a massive fucking wanker. That's Australian for a douchebag. Yeah. He's an inept little soy boy that won't stand up for anything. It's just whatever special interest is, browbeating him. He's all over that. It's kind of crazy what's happening in Australia, but in the scheme of things globally, we don't really move the needle, so no one cares. But it's absolutely insane right now. There's a lot of strong support for. People are coming after Musk. The media is going after Elon Musk, just demonizing the guy as if people being able to freely share their thoughts and opinions online is somehow a threat to people's safety. It's just mental. But like I said, Australia doesn't really move the needle. I'm absolutely disgusted and ashamed to be an Australian based on what's happening at the moment, though. But like I said, it's not a needle mover, so no one really cares outside of this little bubble.
Well, I mean, we don't have a whole lot of room to talk because I think some of the world's, most fearsome enemies of free speech are homegrown from right here in the United States, and they are kind of pulling the strings in a lot of foreign governments, including, many of the former Commonwealth nations as well. So, we don't have a whole lot of room to talk, but at least there's a fight here for, trying to preserve it, which really, I think that brings us somewhat to the reason that I suggested this conversation to Farzad was, we are observing the West and we're observing Tesla, we're observing technology, we're observing X, we're observing Elon and all of these trends. And there's a number of dimensions that it's very concerning. And in all of that, it's, we're trying to figure out why are things the way that they are. I think there's a number of interesting reasons for that we can get into. But then I also saw your comments recently about, and Elon's comments as well. I think a number of other people have mentioned it recently. I saw a great interview between JBP and Matt Ridley, where they were diving into, the relationship between the identity of the West and Christianity specifically, but, religion more broadly, and this cultural identity crisis that we kind of find ourselves in today. And so I just wanted to really start to begin to have that conversation with you as, I am a Christian. I know that you're an atheist. And instead of trying to have the God versus science debate, which I think is really boring and dumb, was more interested in having the what the fuck is going on with the world conversation and try and find maybe some common ground on, for people who maybe their religious endeavor is aimed at trying to discover the most true set of things possible. And from the scientific endeavor, also trying to aim at that. How do we understand the world as it sits today? And maybe go from there on how do we preserve, this experiment that is a massive global society in an age where we're playing with all kinds of new technology and there's like risks coming out the wazoo, but also new horizons. We might be able to settle Mars if we manage not to fuck it up in the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Well, let's get into it. I will start with an observation I made on X maybe a week or so ago. It's obvious to me that most people have a religion-shaped hole in them, and they will fill that with something. And I think historically, I was of the mindset that as people had access to more information, religious belief would decline over time. And it correlates pretty strongly with internet access, people's religious belief overall coming down, more people with questions. And rather than having the answers provided to them, like, oh, hang on a minute, I don't really agree with what I've been taught. That's happened. But what I didn't realize, and it's becoming evident to me over the last few years, that people are now latching onto anything that they believe can fill that hole. And in some cases, it's a cause they are told to feel very strongly about. And suddenly you have people who previously It might have been burning apostates or trying to convert people violently, viciously to their faith, who are now doing the same thing, but with ideologies like transgenderism, a lot of the work ideologies, climate alarmism, extinctionism, and it's the exact same fervent belief and attachment to something. And regardless of any outside evidence, this is what I believe. The whole world needs to believe the same thing as me. And I'm starting to be quite concerned about where things are headed. I think over time, religious belief is going to continue to decline. It seems inevitable. This is a trend. And ignorantly and naively in my earlier sort of my 20s, I would have expected that people would fill this with other forms of meaning. And what I'm discovering is a lot of people are just latching on to any idea or belief system that there's other people that have a strong passion for, and leading to some absolutely insane things. I mean, I can't believe right now that there's anywhere on earth performing genital mutilation or sterilization of people who are under 18 years old who clearly have mental health issues. Instead, there's just a speed run conveyor belt. Kids are a little bit confused. Teenager, next minute they go to a therapist and they're hiding this from their parents. Next minute, you're sterilized or mutilated. Can't get a tattoo, can't vote, can't drink. Some places can't even drive at this age, but suddenly and the people that it's a religion at this point in time. You question the religion, you're basically a heretic, and people come after you with pitchforks. So this is something that I observed recently. I'm deeply concerned about this. I think there are some people out there that will fill that religion-shaped hole with other forms of meaning, whether it's a mission. Carl Sagan would have been a great example, somebody that filled that with an awe and wonder of science, the universe, and cosmology. And Richard Dawkins, I think, is also similar in that regard. He's been quite a staunch atheist in terms of, pointing out a lot of harms from especially Christian belief historically. But he has an almost spiritual wonder for the universe and evolutionary biology. I think at this point in time, I've realized now that it's probably better for most people to be filling that hole with a peaceful religion than most of the current ideologies that people are filling that with. And it's the exact same behavior it's the same stuff. Definitely a religion-shaped hole that people are filling with some potentially very harmful ideas. And that's not to give many of the world's religions a free pass. Many people have done some very horrible things in the name of religion in the past. But I think that most people, most of the world's major religions, they interpret it in the most charitable and peaceful way possible. There's obviously exceptions. And I think that's probably a lot better than people latching onto the latest ideology and thinking that we're having too many children and, you're a burden to the world if you reproduce, or that we're all going to be, 6 feet underwater tomorrow if we don't stop having like warm showers and eating nice food, those kind of things. So I have some deep concerns about where things are headed. But my last comment here, I do see these as teething pains of civilization to be expected. I'm quite optimistic about the future if we get there.
So how does the Soviet Union and, Marxism fit into the way? And I find this to be generally something that very few atheists have ever really thought deeply about, that, Marxism is one of the first preeminent, substitute atheistic religions to really gain mass worldwide acceptance since really the scientific revolution took place. And it also happens to be one of the bloodiest and, most awful forms of government that we've ever seen. And that's one of the places where I wonder if, I 100% would agree that religion has been one of the tools that is used to justify a lot of the world's most awful events. But also, when we look at the world, it is a harsh place, and that Darwinian competition is itself brutal. And that seems to be an inescapable reality of life on this planet, not necessarily contained within the silo of just religion or not religion, especially when you factor in what the Soviet Union was capable of and did to their own citizens. So how do you think about that in the context of maybe defining, what is religion? What are its sins compared to just what is the human condition?
That's a really, really complicated question to even begin to answer. I wouldn't really personally think of Marxism as a religion, more of a belief system and a structure that had some pretty horrendous consequences. And
Yeah, I'd say like a replacement religion, something that was
something to fill
supposed
the
to
hole.
fill that hole. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely one of the less optimal ways of filling that hole, I would say. I think that there's an innate need for people to feel like they identify with a belief system of some kind. And it's amazing to see that people can kind of fall in line in believing and supporting an idea or a belief structure that just has horrendous consequences. What I find even stranger is that despite the mountains of evidence, there are Marxist professors lecturing in the United States today telling everybody how great Marxism is. And you have people like Kamala Harris, suggesting, Soviet-style price controls on groceries as a way to, solve the cost of living issues that people are having. It's like we've been over this 1,000 times. This has played out many times before. You start putting price controls on groceries, next minute you got people starving and waiting in line for bread. And so I don't know what it is, but people don't really like to look at the historical consequences of some of these belief systems. And I don't know how we move away from that unless there's just better systems that are somehow, I guess Richard Dawkins coined the term meme. And in this regard, I'm talking about just an idea or a belief. I think that we need better memes to fill those holes than some of the structures and belief systems we've had in the past. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm very optimistic, but I also recognize that a lot of people are very easily led or misled. And that can be a double-edged sword. We saw what happened in the last couple of years with the scamdemic, how absolutely mental people went. That was a very clear insight into how quickly people can turn from a nice neighbor to absolutely batshit insane because they've been programmed to think or be fearful of a certain thing or act a certain way. So, yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it definitely felt in many ways like, obviously a much less catastrophic version of living through the transformation of German society in the 30s when all of a sudden your neighbor was part of the Gestapo informant ring.
Yep. Spying, dobbing you in. And it's the same behavior we see repeated. It was amazing to watch this happen. I'm like, bro, we've learned nothing.
I think that's a great line. We have learned nothing. Why have we learned nothing? And how do we learn things? And
I think that there is actually an answer in human nature here. I mean, we don't suddenly miraculously have completely different genetic programming. So there are innate traits in human beings that are, hundreds of thousands, millions of years old, depending on how far back you want to go. And those don't disappear overnight. I think that we can get better at sort of understanding our nature and moderating some of our behavior. But at the end of the day, we're the same people we were 100,000 years ago. But the world's very different. And so we see those same patterns playing out. There was a very disturbing experiment years ago that I read about, which really it was a shocking moment to learn about this. Essentially, there was an experiment done where volunteers were brought in and told they were participating, in an experiment. And there was a person in a lab coat or something, giving them a sort of a position of authority or perceived authority, somebody in another room, an actor, playing a role. And the people who the volunteer was with, they were told that they were going to provide an electric shock to the person in the room who was an actor. And the actor would, once they cranked it from 1 to 2 to 3, the person in the lab coat, all right, give them another shock, and you'd hear them react and they'd pretend that they were in a little bit of pain or discomfort. You could hear them sort of owl that hurt, and then eventually they get to the point where they're screaming, and then eventually screaming in agony. And the majority of people who had been brought in to participate in this were willing to shock the person, the actor in the room, to the point where they thought they'd be in complete agony, possibly even, maybe they could even die from this shock because some dickhead in a lab coat was telling them, I just turn up the shock, it's okay, press the button. And that was a point where I'm like, fuck, we're that dumb, that gullible, and that easily led by people who are put on a pedestal in a position of authority. And from that point forward, I've been very, very mindful to always question. I mean, I've always questioned authority anyway. Just talk to any of my school teachers anyway. And got plenty of stories there. But that's human nature. Hundreds of years ago, people decide that if there's, a fly goes into a room and it doesn't leave, suddenly if there's a woman in there, she's a witch, so you need to burn her at the stake. And people just, okay, I'll just start burning witches. And we're the same humans today as we were then. We just have to be cognizant of our sort of shortfalls and be aware how easily we can be misled. I was watching what was happening during the scamdemic, and I could not believe the transformation in people from relatively friendly and kind to just having lost their absolute minds. I'm like, this is the exact same thing we're seeing happen again. So I think we just really need to be aware of our sort of genetic programming and how we'll respond to certain situations. But I don't think most people have an interest in becoming aware of these issues with humans. I mean, we see it over and over and over again how easily people are programmed and misled. So I don't know. I think the best possible option is probably just having good belief systems that encourage people to do the right thing, as opposed to, there being a void that then ends up getting filled with a really bad belief system or causes people to do really horrible things. It'd be nice if everyone just could independently think and be aware of their limitations and not be an asshole. But we're seeing enough evidence now that I think it's in our nature. It's going to be very hard to escape that. We just kind of have to do the best that we can and be aware.
Yeah, I mean, that limbic system is still there. And fight, flight, freeze is a real thing. And when you feel fear, then all of a sudden a lot of those more primitive instincts really kick in.
Well, and that was one of the fear-induced brain damage. And I mean that in a literal sense. Fear causes brain damage, and people basically become retarded. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean, suddenly their cognitive faculties are offline. In a fearful state, they become dangerously stupid and will do really dangerously stupid things. And that's what I mean with that statement, fear-induced brain damage. This is what the media does so well. They propagate enough fear and instill enough fear in people that they can be manipulated quite easily into doing stupid things or believing stupid things.
So, and then if I can jump in here for a second, I think that
please, we've been missing you,
really,
man. Just been hiding in the corner, just listening away.
I'm just absorbing, man. This is an awesome conversation. I think for me, the thing that really freaks me out is like, so we know for a fact that, and I don't know if I remember listening to something or reading something that there's an evolutionary reason for humans to want to latch on to a leader of some sort or some sort of like thing that is trying to person of authority or somebody that's a guiding light, right? Or something in whatever respects. And I think one of the things that's getting weird about this time is that we've niched down so many different ways in which people can find that leader, right? Whereas before in old times, like say tens of thousands of years ago, the number of people you would consider to be of a certain stature or can provide leadership to a group on what the right thing is to do, it's probably limited to small things, maybe the household, the family, faith, safety, business, whatever. I mean, whatever it could be. But I feel like there's like maybe 10 or 20. Whereas now, in the age of information and in the age of the internet, where we can build communities up out of nothing for in whatever dimension, all of a sudden we've gone from like 10 or 20 of these to like literally millions, right? And I think that's what's so confusing about this time. It's because now we don't even know what's really feels safe or unsafe anymore, because we live. And I think this is like a Western world phenomena. Truly, I don't think the Eastern world, or I don't think that. Sorry, I think this is like a first world type of phenomena where it's like people that have most of their safety stuff figured out already, those societies, they have the time to worry about this kind of shit. Whereas the ones that don't have all this stuff going on, they're actually still operating in a sense of, okay, shelter, food, safety,
survival,
right? Survival. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Once you yank that survival variable, we go fucking crazy. Like we lose our minds because that, again, like the way you've painted it. And so where my fear comes in is in the age of social media, in the age of the internet, in the age of artificial intelligence, where we have algorithms that will hyperdrive themselves to try and hack that system, right? How in what world is this going to get better? Like how like logistically speaking, and I know you're optimistic, I'm optimistic. I don't know how I'm optimistic, but I'm optimistic. But it's like I'm trying to think through like the process of how we get there. And I'm really, really, really struggling. So have you thought about the process from which this optimism is born, where we realize our weaknesses, we realize our weaknesses from a primal perspective, and we work to like fix them. Because I don't think this just happens. I think something giant has to happen. So maybe walk me through how you're thinking about this.
Well, I think at a pretty high level, it's just going to be a battle of the ideas. The strongest ideas will survive. Now, whether or not they're the best ideas is a different matter, but ideas are competing for our mind space. And if an idea is very viral and people, for whatever reason, seem to agree with that idea, take that idea on board, that idea will come to dominate. And if the idea, for whatever reason, isn't fairly contagious, doesn't really stick with people, it disappears. It's just like evolutionary biology, survival of the fittest. If you're not suited to your environment as an idea, you disappear. If you are suited to your environment, I think you stick around. And so I think the way that this plays out is ideas are going to continue to battle, and it's only my sort of naive optimism that would be hopeful that the right ideas, useful, helpful, positive ideas, end up sort of rising to the top. I don't know how it plays out, but I do think overall, most people want to do the right thing and are trying to be good humans. There's the small percentage of people out there that are nefarious, but they are a minority. So if my optimism comes from the fact that I think most people do want to do the right thing and are trying to be good people. However, that doesn't sort of get us away from the fact that many people who mean well do very bad things because bad ideas have been installed into their brain and they act on those thinking they're doing the right thing. And in fact, it's the opposite. The trans, mania at the moment is a great example of that. I don't think most of the people who are butchering and mutilating and sterilizing children are trying to cause irrevocable, horrible, just destruction of this person's future and inevitable regret, but they are. So my optimistic outlook is if the right ideas can replace some of these crazy ideas, things look good. And if not, well, it was nice knowing you.
Yeah, that's where I get freaked out. Because I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to like, okay, so the person that we follow very closely, Elon Musk, I think all three of us would say he's one of the ones that's trying to, let's say, push some of those good ideas. You have other people, that are having those great conversations online. Your Eric Weinsteins, your Joe. I would consider Joe Rogan to be somebody, as people like to make fun of him, for how simpleton he is. I really think he sets a standard for culture in a way that's very underestimated. And he has
Joe's actually a lot smarter than he gets credit for as well.
He's very smart.
Genuinely, he's a very smart guy. He certainly likes to entertain some very interesting ideas, but he's a very intelligent guy. He's always asking questions. He does believe some dumb shit, quite embarrassingly so on occasion. But that makes him quite interesting to watch. And I think that Joe is doing a great service to humanity because he's having a lot of important conversations and presenting them to a very broad general audience. I mean, who doesn't watch a bit of Joe Rogan or listen to some of the podcasts?
True.
He's got the biggest audience on the planet. And so he's presenting a lot of very interesting ideas. He doesn't get enough credit, I think, as he should for putting those conversations out there to a huge audience.
I agree. And I think the other thing too, though, is that it's, I don't know the guy. I can't say I trust him 100%, but it appears that he also has a good moral compass, right? And I think that's a very important thing in this day and age, because you have to have a combination of like very key features to actually be one of those people that can bring forward, let's say, good ideas. You have to have a good moral compass, which I do agree. I think a vast majority of people do have that moral compass, but then they also have to have the time and the ability to understand what ideas are out there and which ones are actually good for society. And then they have to have the balls to speak up and fight through what's going to be a hellacious time to fight for that idea in the public arena, right? So like requires
the balls are a big factor.
Yeah.
Most people, that is the key missing ingredient.
By far.
Because it takes courage to speak up. People are concerned about being judged. We're talking about, sort of human evolution. If you are ostracized from the tribe, historically speaking, and remember, we have the same program, you're fucked. If you're a woman, you're absolutely fucked. Because if you're pregnant, you're dependent on other people. If you're a woman who's pregnant and you get ostracized from the tribe, it's game over. So women, you'll note, on average, tend to be much more agreeable than men on average. And men in particular have the same desire to not be ostracized from the tribe. But worst case, a guy can go fend for himself, hunt, kill from an evolutionary point of view. And this, I think, is the major obstacle. It's people, when they see bad ideas, being unwilling to speak up because they're concerned about being judged, being kicked out of the tribe, so to speak, their social circle, potentially losing a job, employment, caring about what other people think. And so most people, I think, know that a lot of what's happening is crazy, but they're unwilling to speak up. And this is, I think, going back to your earlier question about sort of how do we get out of this situation? More people need to speak up on things that matter to them when they see something and go, this is wrong. This needs to be, just speak up, grow a pair. It's not easy, but that's the whole point of having a pair. It's not easy. It's doing what's right and speaking up when it's really important to you, knowing that risks will come with that, because alternative is to just sort of sleepwalk into oblivion.
I couldn't agree more. And I think what's interesting about that is I've seen that sort of phenomenon happen with me directly now that I have this thing, whatever this thing is that I can't tell you how many times, I've talked to people, and one of the key things that I hear either, in person or when I talk to people online or at events and stuff, the one common thing I always hear is like, hey, props to you for going out there and speaking, like saying the thing. Like that's like their biggest takeaway. They're like, man, that's fucking awesome. Like you're doing it, you're out there, not necessarily that you're making good content, but like, hey, props to you for being out there and like, doing it. And I'm not saying I make good content. I'm just saying like that's the
no one says that.
Right. No one says, and they shouldn't.
No,
honestly.
But I agree. I get some similar feedback. People, in fact, the most common thing I ever hear from somebody is either some combination of don't change, keep being you. I love the fact that you're willing to speak your mind. And obviously that offends plenty of people along the way as well. But a lot of people who don't feel they can speak up, or they don't have a reasonably sized platform. So even if they do speak up, they don't reach an audience. I think there's a lot of respect from people that acknowledge that sharing your thoughts to your audience, knowing that there's risk with doing that, is the right thing to do. And I think the only people that don't respect that are gigantic sausage wallets who are too scared of sharing their own opinion, and they want to feel better by bringing you down because you're confident enough to share your thoughts, whereas they're not. So the best way for them to deal with that and to cope is just to attack you. How dare you have your opinion? Shut up. By the way, I just have to go on a quick side note. There are still people today, I get messages occasionally from like a guy that's suffering probably from estrogen poisoning, demanding that I stop sharing my opinions on certain topics. Like a grown man is like telling me that I should stop. Like, fuck off, bro. You're not going to feel better. I'm not going to change. And I think, again, more people should be sharing their thoughts on things that really matter to them. It doesn't mean you have to have an opinion on everything. I'm ignorant about most things. But if something really matters, have the courage to speak up, because most people are not completely mental. Most people are fairly sane and they do want to do the right thing. But there's a huge silent majority who are just sitting back, unwilling or unable to speak up. And the tide turns. Musk is a great example. He's given permission to people like Mark Zuckerberg now to start speaking a few truths that previously never would have happened. Like Zuckerberg's now out on the record saying that he regrets basically bending over to the demands in terms of censorship.
Huge moment.
He also called Donald Trump a badass for pumping his fist after getting shot in the ear, which is true. And keeping in mind that almost everyone who works for Mark Zuckerberg and Meta votes Democrat, at least historically has. So he took a huge personal risk. And I'm sure the only reason he's done this is because he's seen Musk with his gigantic nuts swinging around going, oh, this guy can speak up on stuff and take the heat. Maybe I can too. What's the point of having fuck you money if you don't say fuck you occasionally?
100%. And I think that's where, as we've gone through this thought exercise, that's where my optimism comes in, is that if you look at history, every bad thing that has ever happened, at some point, sometimes a little too late and sometimes like way too late, like we still figure it out. Like we go through that darkness. It's just my like, I don't, and again, this is very selfish of me to say this because it's kind of outside my control. It somewhat, that I hope we don't live in one of those times where it's like one of the darkest periods where we have to go through this thing where because of that thing we have going on with technology and artificial intelligence and sort of this, the amount of people that just exist now, the pure number of people that exist now that can now leverage their agenda, their politics, their goals to impact the world how they see fit, like that's going to become harder and harder to fight against as a population unless we are also able to leverage some sort of technology or something to fight back. And I think that's where things like freedom of speech and not getting deplatformed and being able to voice an opinion and have the freedom of expression and getting out there. And just even if you're wrong, just at least empower people to get the fuck out there and do what they think is the right thing to do. As long as we have that, we're fine. It will get weird. It will get strange. People will still fight. And this is like sort of back to the topic of conversation that we started with, is like the guiding light for people to want to do that is also an important thing too, because it's like, how do you land in the position to want to take that on because of that discomfort, right? If you have now that I have a kid, I don't know how the family of 5 that have to work 2 jobs to ensure that their family is just making ends meet. And then, when you come home from work at a job you don't want to work at, and then you have to deal with the complexities of home, where are you going to find the time to want to take this on, or the energy, right? And so how is human or robots going to help that, right? Now that we've freed up some time, are people not going to start going down a lot more rabbit holes? Are not people going to find like the time and the ball? That's where I start getting optimistic, right? And that's like when I'm like, yes, we're actually going somewhere good. So anyway, I ranted a little bit, but I just wanted to brain dump because I've been thinking about that quite a bit.
Yeah, I do want to add one comment on there. The fact that now with social media and technology and AI, more people can have a voice, I think will be a net positive, because previously we just had a few centralized, voices of authority. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be some absolute nut jobs that find their audience now, but there's also going to be many, many tens, if not eventually hundreds of millions of people sharing their perspective and finding their audience as well. And I think the more ideas in the ecosystem, the better overall. Being able to be exposed to different information and different perspectives, I'd much rather have access to millions of perspectives than 3 or 4 predetermined, pre-approved perspectives from centralized, news outlet or a media source. And one other final thing on that point, the legacy media is fucked. They're going extinct, and this is going to be very positive overall. They control a lot of NPCs at the moment. It's very sad and disheartening to see, but the media does an excellent job at manipulating people that don't think for themselves and just installing beliefs in their brains. They're going away. These people will have no choice now but to determine what they believe is true and their own thoughts by some other means. And they're probably going to have to find some independent content creators or sort of more distributed content rather than just being spoon-fed from the news. And one final note on this, it's not just that the legacy media is going extinct, but the people who kind of their thought patterns are ossified, older generations, the average viewer of CNN's in their 70s, these people won't be here in a couple of decades' time. And so legacy media is going away, and so are many people who still trust legacy media. So we're going to enter a new era where people are looking for sources of ideas and truth and information, and there's no legacy media out there to propagandize. So I'm hopeful that there'll be a cultural shift where people find sources of information and people whose ideas they generally share, and they'll see content occasionally they'll disagree with, but they'll be more interested and open, as opposed to getting centralized ideas just broadcast directly to them and assuming that, well, this came from a news network, therefore I trust it. My neighbors all think this, therefore I trust it. I'm kind of hopeful that more people will come to form their opinions a little bit more independently than just from centralized sources of information, because there's going to be so much choice out there.
Couldn't agree more. Go ahead, Hans.
Do you think that the Rebel Alliance of, small independent media people can defeat the Death Star of centralized censorship? I mean, it sure seems
that's inevitable over time. It is inevitable over time.
Why do you say that?
Yeah. There's a huge thirst out there from people it just makes more sense to have many solutions out there. Great examples of this, media companies like the Patrick Bet David Network. They've got an extremely popular podcast talking about topics that most people typically would have thought would find very dry, do great analysis, interesting perspectives. You've got Daily Wire as well, a huge media company serving a need. And I think there's just very strong evidence now. A couple of years ago, CNN tried to launch a premium service. They spent over $100 million and had to pull the plug. It was embarrassing. My Patreon subscriber numbers were not that far off the numbers they got for this gigantic service. They'd spent $100+ million. I'm like, dude, they are so fucked. Nobody wanted to pay for CNN's premium content because it's horseshit and everybody knows it. They're the crisis news network. So I think that over time, people are much more likely to gravitate to sources that have a slightly different perspective to what they're hearing from the mainstream. And there's just got to be an endless thirst for this. Megyn Kelly's another great example. She's left the hate stream media. She's absolutely destroying it. Her platform, on YouTube. Tucker's another great example as well I was going to bring up. These two have left the machine. They weren't cogs in the machine. They were superstars. And now that they've left, they've found a massive audience and they're able to speak more freely about topics. If you guys will recall a hilarious interaction, I think from 2015, Megyn Kelly was talking to Donald Trump, interviewing him. And she basically starts off by saying, you've called women that you don't like, fat pigs and this, that, and the other. And Trump just comes back and just, only Rosie O'Donnell. And Megyn Kelly at that point in time was a combination of turned on and almost trying to hide her laughter because that was a brilliant delivery. She's gone from being quite hostile toward Trump now that she's out of the machine, to being very supportive and really sharing her perspective. And people on average, aren't that stupid. You understand when somebody like Tucker or Megyn Kelly is removed from the machine. Now they're no longer controlled. They don't, oh shit, the pharmaceutical, I better not say anything about the safety profile. Suddenly they're able to speak completely freely. So people have this intuitive understanding that they're more trustworthy now that they're out of the machine. There's also folks like Don Lemon, who was just a cog in the machine, and now that he's left the machine, nobody wants to watch because it's absolute garbage. And so it's a great example. I think that there's a huge audience out there of people who really want a genuine perspective, not a piece of propaganda, which is what most mainstream outlets produce at the moment. And so my faith, it may be a little optimistic, but I think most people intuitively understand that if they're hearing from an independent content creator or an independent platform and not a centralized media outlet, they're more likely to get honest thoughts from the person they're hearing from, as opposed to the one true narrative, which needs to be propagated because there's a network and there's advertisers that they can't say this, because everybody knows who butters their bread. And not everybody, I think, has this understanding, but I think a lot of people do. You're much more likely to get the truth from somebody and their genuine thoughts when they're not tethered to a gigantic centralized media machine. So I think there's going to be a lot of demand for that.
And some other names I want to throw out, like Bill Maher, Jimmy Dore. I mean, Joe Rogan is another one too, right? Like these are guys, Bill Maher and Jimmy Dore, from the other side of the political spectrum. But they are very much, from my perspective, they are speaking very freely, and Bill Maher has been doing so for a long time as well.
Yes.
So
Bill's
I think
a very interesting case. He's
I love
got
him.
serious TDS, but he's also really good. So
Yeah.
quite funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
He said not too long ago that he would vote for a jar of blue goo over Donald Trump. And I'm like, okay, that's the point where you can't. You've lost your credibility, bro. If you literally vote for slime over somebody that has a track, you have to be. That's delusion. But Bill's great, and he has a huge audience as well. He's a very funny guy. He's really good at what he does, and he's obviously very left leaning as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the demand side. I mean, it's just obvious that most of the baloney that we've been fed for, the past several decades from these legacy media institutions was just total garbage. But I do look at what, Mike Benz is reporting on, that the United States government is really building this whole censorship industrial complex around trying to restrict individuals' ability to have free speech, because it's, very, very problematic sometimes. It's great when you want to topple some dictator in the Middle East. It's not so great when those same things end up electing Donald Trump instead of, Hillary Clinton, who is the one true appointed nominee. So that's the area where my concern comes from, is that we are, experimenting with some pretty dangerous tools in order to be able to suppress at scale, like we saw in the pandemic, people's ability to speak freely, even on, regardless of what platform they are on. And
I know. Yeah.
Obviously, Elon's going to stand up to them, but what is his ability to continue to stand up against them? And is it, can he do that indefinitely?
It's a good question. I think that Musk, as I said, has kind of given permission to others, and I think the pendulum is starting to swing. It's deeply concerning to imagine the world without Musk's acquisition of X. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the Wall Street analysts covering Tesla, what are you talking about, bro? But it's extremely significant in the future course of humanity, because without the acquisition of X, I'm cancelled for sure. I was constantly getting shadow banned, and people couldn't search for my username on X when it was previously under Twitter ownership. And for what? Like, I don't even know what I said. I probably stopped mutilating children's genitals or something along those lines. And I was always on a knife's edge with YouTube. And even during the scamdemic, I had to be extremely careful. I'm always thinking 5 steps ahead, not to tag anything relating to that in the content I was posting on Patreon, because they had their own insane rules and they've deplatformed people previously for having opinions somewhere else. I'm like, you know what? I don't want to even give them a possibility, because I was speaking out against the lockdowns almost from day one. And there's receipts, you guys, I can share a link with you later. You can put it in the show notes if people want proof. Early 2020, saying that the side effects of the lockdowns are going to be far worse. That I've been there. And so I was always concerned, if I say the wrong thing, I'm gone. And I would much rather be able to keep sharing my thoughts and opinions. And this was an environment where every one false move, I'm gone, completely deplatformed. I'd be going off Patreon, I'd be going off YouTube, and I disappear off the internet. Same with Twitter. But now X has given people a platform where they can share their thoughts and opinions and ideas. And I think that this is now going to give permission to other companies. We already saw, after Musk acquired X, YouTube had this insane policy where if you questioned certain outcomes of certain presidential elections, you just get banned instantly. If you made a comment about something, it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. If you're even asking questions, gone off the fucking platform. That's insane. YouTube reversed that policy maybe 6 or so months ago out of absolutely nowhere. Probably got nothing to do with some of the lawsuits and evidence coming out. But if there was no X acquisition, there's no way they would have done that. They're just getting, there's pressure now from X. People are gravitating towards X at a phenomenal rate too. The month-over-month growth is sometimes double-digit percentage points. People want a source that they feel more trusting of. And I think the pendulum is going to swing. But at the same time, there's going to be some extreme measures coming from centralized media and governments that want to suppress people's ability to share their thoughts and opinions. We're already seeing this. They're not even thinly veiled threats. People talking about potentially jailing Elon Musk. The dickhead Prime Minister of Australia, who one more time is a massive fucking wanker, trying to suggest that maybe, he has the best interest of the people of Australia in mind, not Elon Musk, and how dare people share their thoughts. Fuck off. So I think that the pendulum is going to swing in the right direction. But as it does, those who are going to lose their grip on the one true narrative are not going to give it up easily. So brace for impact. It's going to be anything but boring in the next few months.
Yeah, I think the whole free speech, capable of sharing an opinion freely. My one theory from the very beginning, since Elon purchased X, was that if they can figure out how to make it profitable, if they can figure out how to put some sort of earnings variable to it that supersedes or it does better than the alternative, it's a surefire win. Like if people make more money just being honest and speaking their mind, it's over. Yeah. It's just over, because then every single incentive, every single thing is aligned. And I'm like, okay, so is that possible? And as you know, it's funny you mentioned the YouTube thing, because I experienced something very, very similar on my channel where we posted the interview of Elon and RFK Jr. Remember that space they did a couple years ago?
Oh, RFK Jr., dirty word, red alert. I know where this is going. Bro, I know exactly where this is going. Please tell us how this story ends, because I don't know the ending.
Okay, the second we put on that interview up, like within minutes, we had to take this content down because of COVID misinformation and vaccine misinformation. Yeah. Okay. The hilarious thing is that they didn't even talk about COVID or the vaccine on the fucking podcast.
Of course.
Right?
Dirty word, RFK Jr.
Dirty. Okay.
Dirty words. Yep.
So what happened? So a few months after Elon bought X, I'm like, okay, I'm going to re-upload this motherfucker and see how it does. Okay. Guess what? 1 million views. Took a few months, but it went. Okay. And then he had that panel with Alex Jones, the Tate guy, Andrew Tate.
Oh, Andrew Tate. Yep.
Vivek. There was some other guy. I mean, it was just in like every single dirty word, every single banned person you can find was on that space. Okay. And I'm like, okay, we should post this anyway. We'll supercut it. We'll serve it to the audience. If I get banned, I get banned. Okay. 2 million views. Okay. And monetized to hell. Let me be very clear about that. Okay. We even offered Mario to give him a cut, and Mario's like, "Nah, you'll keep it. Just put the link." I'm like, "Okay, that's fucking, you're great. Thank you very much for that." But YouTube had no problem monetizing against it. I'm like, "Okay, wait a second. Hold on a second. Why was this such a huge deal months ago and now is not?" It's because it's just an Overton window thing, right? It's just now it's okay. Now it's okay because there is a singular company and a singular person that kind of said, okay, this should be okay. Why isn't this okay? Let me put in my 44 billion and ensure that it's okay. And now YouTube's like, okay, fine, I guess it's okay. And now, Zuckerberg, you're like, okay, I guess it's okay too. Right. So now the variables are coming in now where because you have that thirst from the population that is waking up to the fact that legacy media is dog shit and nobody almost nobody trusts it, that I think has the time to understand that they're not really there to serve you the truth and what's going on. They're there to just propagandize you in a way that they want to, however you want to define that. And the fact that we have, again, those people like your Rogans and your Tuckers and your Kellys and your Mars and your Jimmy Dores, and go down the list of all these different people that are gaining gigantic audiences from those people that are leaving that system. And now where you have the last one is the profitability aspect. The advertisers, I feel like if they don't get comfortable with advertising against this content, it's going to like maybe impact it. But I think the forcing function is that's where the eyeballs are. And so they would be idiots to not advertise against this content because that's where the eyeballs are. So how can you like justify not advertising against this? And we're already seeing that shift. Yeah. So I'm actually I think you're right. I think this has a very good ending. It's just a matter of time because there's too many forcing functions to get us there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to add, I think that a lot of people don't appreciate how much of a difference it makes by supporting independent content creators. If you watch a network, a podcast, whether it's, PBD or Tucker or Megan or anybody, the best thing you can possibly do is to support them, buy products, sign up for their affiliates, because this creates a revenue stream that is decoupled from the dependence on advertisers. And it therefore creates the possibility for this to continue to grow. But in addition, it creates an example for others out there. Oh, this podcast, how did they just pay this new person to join the podcast for $50 million a year? They must, maybe I can start sharing my opinions. And what's going to happen is going to have a domino effect. If it becomes sustainable for many independent content creators to create their stuff and not be dependent on advertisers immediately, this creates an example for others, and suddenly you have this huge chain reaction. Now, I've said in the past, I don't need the money, but many others do. I really do want to encourage people watching. If there are content creators out there whose values are in alignment with yours, support them. You don't have, whatever the minimum amount, just help these people out. It may not seem like a lot, but it can be the difference between them being able to continue or not. And it can also be the difference between setting a strong enough example where somebody is able to quit a full-time job and people are like, oh shit, the dude who just makes content on X now quit his job. He can, maybe I'll start sharing my opinions. That's the fastest way that this is actually going to shift. I think advertisers are going to be a little bit late to the party. I think that the real example being set is people who are full-time independent content creators and platforms and networks. If people support those networks sharing ideas and who have similar values, I think that's really the best way to accelerate this transition. And I think that the media will follow, the eyeballs will follow, but I think setting a good example is important.
Before I throw it to Hans here, you want to take 15 seconds to plug my AG1 link since we're talking about supporting creators? You want to give it a little plug?
Wait.
Or you're on the spot.
Do it. What are you? You're ag1.com/Farzad?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Get on it. Get on every day. Great for digestion in particular. All right. How are your shits, Farzad?
Really good.
Exactly. See, that's the selling point today. It'll improve your shit. Actually, though.
Yes, actually.
Highly recommend it.
Thank you. Link in the description below.
That's right. Use his link, by the way. Don't use mine. Farzad. Drink ag1.com/Farzad, right?
Or his. SMR. Is yours SMR?
No.
SMR?
I don't need the money. It's all good.
Oh, come on. Stephen Mark Ryan, go find them. Use this link. All right, Hans, go.
No. I may as well plug my secret OnlyFans while we're doing this, right? No.
Yes. That's what people really need.
There we go. That's what we're here for.
No, it's got to stay secret.
One of the connections I made earlier while we were discussing the X acquisition was going back to the lab experiment that you talked about, SMR, with the person in the lab coat. And I think these organizations like YouTube, the CEO of YouTube wants to make more money. Like, he doesn't want to be beholden to all these crazy things that, all the dirty words that we have to shut down and not earn money off of. But there's some guy down the hall who used to work at the FBI, who now works for you, who's getting calls from people who actually work at the FBI about all the things that you need to be shutting down. And like, we saw from the X-Files that this is how all of those dirty word lists were populated. Like this was pressure that was being put on them by the United States government. And that's where all of this censorship originated from. And it just like people inside the company are all too happy. Oh, Mr. FBI lab coat man, of course we must shut this down, shut this down, shut this down. And yeah, it's great to see people like Elon stand up to that and show the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world that, you can have balls and tell the US government to go fuck themselves if they don't have constitutional grounds. And if you want to, like, you can put into the light of day what it is that they're pressuring you to do through back channels and, behind closed doors to be able to protect your own values and be able to preserve your own freedoms.
I think on that, I will say that courage is contagious. It does take a few people with a little bit of an extra dose of courage initially, but it is contagious. When you see other people standing up and pushing back, suddenly it gives people that aren't quite as courageous a little bit of permission. Oh, you know what? He can do that. I can do that as well. So as I've said, I think the pendulum is swinging, and I think we can't overstate Musk's impact on this battle for free speech with acquiring X and being willing to take the arrows and telling advertisers to their face that you can't blackmail the company. It's not about money. I think this really is setting an example, and more people, more and more companies are starting to wake up.
For sure.
Well, and on advertisers, I think it only takes a couple of black sheep to split from the herd on the advertising front and be like, no, we're just going to go advertise in all of those places.
Yeah.
And they will outcompete the people who are trying to be wankers. And
I completely
the market
agree
will
on that
fix
point.
that problem.
I agree. I think what's happening right now is many of these brands are beholden to DEI experts and woke morons who shouldn't have a job, who are a net drag on the company, saying, oh, you can't possibly be affiliated with all this terrible thing. And people are too scared to say, no, fuck you, that's dumb. Like, there's customers here. Just because this person has an opinion that's a little bit outside of the one true narrative, why would we not want to market to that audience? There's a lot of that internal pressure. And I think the companies are going to start completely gutting the dead weight from them. And suddenly all these morons who are demanding a brand, don't you dare advertise on this platform or near this particular content, they're not even going to have a job anymore. And the pressure to, okay, I better not offend anybody in my organization is going to go away. The thing with advertisers, to me, YouTube having these advertiser-friendly guidelines has always been strange to me, because it's not the advertisers who are explicitly deciding, I specifically do not want my ads running on this page, on this video. They just have much broader categories. This is advertiser-friendly because they didn't drop too many F-bombs and rah, rah, rah. This has limited ads because maybe they had something slightly positive to say about their experiences with psychedelics, and no ads possibly on this content because it's basically, Nazis telling everybody that. But that's not actually the case. So a lot of advertisers are just like, oh, I don't want to be, too fringe out there. But it's not a case-by-case basis for what's being decided to advertise or not advertise. These advertisers are missing out on huge opportunities because somebody has made a decision, oh, yeah, we don't want to be too out there, so let's only put our ads on the content that YouTube has deemed totally appropriate for advertisers. They're not getting down at a granular level and thinking, well, why is this particular content that YouTube thinks should be limited ads? Why is it that way? What are they talking about? What's the discussion here? And so I think that a lot of advertisers don't realize they're leaving a huge amount of opportunity on the table, because some box tickers like, oh, well, our brand is really family friendly and therefore we can't possibly be associated with this, that, or the other. And I also do want to add, what's going to happen over time is that brands are going to go direct to content creators and not use these third parties and do integrated advertising and marketing and promotion and affiliates, because there's a much greater opportunity to cut out the middleman there. And Mr. Beast is a good example of that with his own products that he's able to promote in his videos, right? The guy launches a chocolate bar or this, that, or the other and promotes it, and suddenly has built a company that's up there with some of the best in terms of its valuation based on total revenue by going direct to the consumer. I think a lot of these brands don't realize how much opportunity they're leaving on the table by, just following the box ticking and deciding, well, we better not put any advertising near anything that could potentially be offensive to a single person. So I think that's going to change a lot.
Especially in this, yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think it's just a matter of time. Too much attention. Too many people are thirsty for the things that we weren't supposed to talk about. Not even 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever it was. People are just hungry for real. People are hungry for honest. They've always been hungry for real and honest. It's just for some reason, for the last 20 to 40 years, we've had a slow decay into what is acceptable or not taboo to talk about, right? And now we've seen a sudden shift, and that's where all the attention's going to be. And yeah, I agree 1,000%. It would be silly. Like, if you're an advertiser watching this, I don't know why you would, but if you are, thank you very much. Number one, like and subscribe. And like and subscribe for Hans and Stephen Mark Ryan as well.
No, don't subscribe to me, please. Or like, that's disgusting. How dare you say that?
But
like an unsub.
Yeah, and block, all that good stuff. But it's y'all are leaving so much money on the table. Just talk to people. Like, if you just go outside and talk to people, what are people? I've always found this so freaking interesting, and I don't know if this is y'all's lived experience. Maybe I'm friends and I'm around people that are lunatics, but 90% of the conversations I have with my friends, family, people that we throw a couple at the bar, the conversation always devolves into something that would be deemed, oh, you shouldn't be talking about that because it's deep, it's raw, it's controversial, it's dirty, it's funny. You're saying things you're not supposed to be saying, right? But that's human nature. That's how we connect with each other. I feel like I think humans connect through this like weird way of just being really raw and honest with each other, and like displaying our flaws or like the kooky things we think about. But then that's how we build that bond, that kinship with each other. And to not harvest that in this day and age of information, where you can flood the internet with that type of content, which is what people are going to gravitate to mostly, because that is what really resonates with people, to me seems like the dumbest business idea of all time. If I'm an advertiser, I'm advertising on every single channel that is deemed controversial. Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan, whatever. Just go down the list. I don't care who it is. Just if Elon, I will like literally post an ad on every single crazy thing that Elon says. I'd be like, buy my product, whatever, like that joke he made about, which I think was worded poorly about Harris, and what will happen with Trump or whatever.
Yeah.
But
it wasn't worded poorly, but there's a lot of people who want to interpret things in the wrong way. He's literally making an observation that all of the assassination attempts have been directed at Donald Trump, which was suggesting that the media rhetoric is clearly having an outsized impact on people who don't like Trump, versus no impact. There's no manifestation of deranged people trying to take out Kamala or Biden. He's just making an observation. People with bad intentions intentionally interpreted that to suggest, well, maybe some people should catch up. So people are, but these weren't genuine responses, and it wasn't a poorly worded post. People with bad intentions intentionally misinterpret that. Right? It's just like saying the sky's blue, and then suddenly getting attacked for observing the sky's blue. You must be racist. It should be a different color. Like, people were just inventing some meaning there. But Musk could have thought ahead of time, people will interpret this the wrong way on purpose. Bad actors will interpret this the wrong way. It's just like when he talked about the fact that, all these pronouns are ridiculous and excessive, aesthetically speaking. You've got a drop-down box on a website, and it's like Mr., Mrs., Zing, Zang, Zong, Ding, and you got 50,000. He makes a comment about the aesthetic ridiculousness of having 1,000 different options for people's gender identity, and suddenly people with bad intentions interpret that as him being transphobic somehow, when he's just making a statement of fact. That's what happened there. But I totally acknowledge he could have known ahead of time people would interpret this.
I will take it one step further, though.
Way.
I take it one step further. I think I agree with you that there's definitely people out there that will take whatever he says as like they're trying to take it to the worst possible scenario, even though it's very literal. But I think there's sometimes, and with all due respect, I really think this is a weak point in how this is being analyzed, because you have to analyze the times of where we are right now. I'm not saying he shouldn't say this. I'm just saying, like, the response he got from it, probably he shouldn't be surprised by it, because we just had it's the second assassination.
Unsurprising. I agree. Right? It's unsurprising. Yes. Yeah. But it's not through a fault of him observing reality. It's through the fact that there are bad actors who will intentionally try to paint the worst possible interpretation of a comment. I personally wouldn't have posted that because I would have thought, man, people are going to take this the wrong way and think I'm trying to suggest that, people should be taking out Biden or Kamala.
Yes.
That's the thought process he could have, and he did not. But
that's my point. Thank you.
But that's not on. No, I totally agree with that. But my point here is that, people are, no matter what is said, are always going to take the least charitable interpretation when it comes to someone like Musk or Trump. And so they do need to be mindful of that. But it's not a post that should need to be deleted or taken back or changed. It's just we're living in an environment now where you can't make an accurate observation of reality without thinking, hang on, what are the worst possible actors going to do to try and interpret this in the least charitable possible way to make it look like something that it's not? It reminds me very much of the insane claims we're hearing where people are quoting Donald Trump out of context, referring to a bloodbath in the automotive industry under a Harris-Biden administration due to the Chinese EVs, and the media just regurgitating that Trump said there'll be a bloodbath if he doesn't win the election. These are bad actors. Trump, you could say the same thing about Donald Trump. Well, you shouldn't have used the word bloodbath to describe the economic situation.
I think that's different.
Industry. Right. But it's not. It's people taking an uncharitable interpretation of something that was a reasonable statement. There's no difference between that at a high level. It's taking a statement that was reasonable and distorting it in a way that paints it in a negative light. There's no difference there. No meaningful difference.
But there's not like shootings at like legacy automakers of people actually dying. You know what? Like I think just the context of it. Anyway, I think we both agree that what he said is not inaccurate. I am a little bit more sensitive to the times of when he said that because
you don't have enough Asperger's.
That's probably what it is.
Exactly. He's not an autist enough. And I think you said it enough. I'm a little bit too sensitive to
fuck you.
Was that an offer?
Fuck you. I think I totally get what you're. I totally get it. I think it's not an incorrect statement. Okay. Anyway, I want to put this aside.
Yeah, we've covered it. We've covered it.
We'll move on. Okay, go ahead, Hans. Go for it. I know you came off mute.
I was just gonna say that you don't have enough Asperger's. That's the only comment that I had for that.
You're probably true. I think you're very right there. How much longer do we have you for, Steven? I want to be cognizant of your time.
Actually, you know what? If I can take a quick bathroom break, you can have me for a bit longer.
Yeah, go for it.
Can we do this?
Yes.
All right.
Go for it.
Okay, I might leave the headphones here, just unless you want to listen. I mean, I don't know what you're into, but if
thanks, you can mute.
Want to join me? I'll leave the camera too. Then
Farzad usually takes his when he goes.
It's true. Yeah, I really do think I don't have enough Asperger's to kind of. It's a very good observation. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Like, I do wonder if he really didn't think about it. Like, was it an actual oversight on his part that people would read it that way because he thinks so literally that like that didn't even occur to him? Or was it just that he's thought, some people might take it that way, but I don't care, fuck it? Or was it like, did he 100% know that's how it was going to be taken and decided to do it anyways?
I think it's the first one. I think he probably, because he called it a joke. That's the interesting part of it too. Is like he called it a joke. It's like, people, should have known that a joke that is lands in person's land on X. I'm like, number one, how is that a joke? And so to me, I just think it's autism. It was just fucking. I think just the autism took over. And listen, I think for people that followed him long enough, we're like for me, it was like, oh God. Like I replied to him like, oh God, come on, man. Like you have no idea what's about to come your way. So I totally get what Steven's saying. Like, yeah, like for sure. But then there was also like a lot of people like, oh, come on, bro. Like context clues, come on. This just not, when we're thirsty for when people are hungry for unity, like anyway, yeah. I don't want to keep beating this dead horse. We should we should go maybe that fucking thumbs up. I hate that thing. Maybe we'll go
fucking Zoom.
It is,
because that never happens to me anywhere else. So that's not an Apple thing on this. Like that is legit Zoom. I have made sure that I turn that off.
Yeah, seems like fuck you. We're keeping it in. We should maybe go until like 9:30. for Stephen? Because I know he said a little bit longer. So did you?
I don't really have like the conversation has moved past like
Gentlemen,
Yeah.
think.
Hello.
I'm
Yep.
back. Hello, can you hear me?
Welcome back. Yeah, yeah. Can you hear us?
Cool. Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. We're trying to we're gonna keep you for 15 more, if that's okay,
Sure.
Stephen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely want to be cognizant of your time. We're trying to figure out we started with purpose. Like we started with religion, like trying to fill that hole that is left in civilization right now. Actually, if you don't mind, Hans, can I go down a rabbit hole real quick?
Yeah.
If that's okay. So that is one thing that I've been struggling with personally myself, right? Is I was raised in a household like both my parents were born in Iran. Both my parents were practicing Muslims. I don't really think they're practiced much, especially my dad nowadays. I would consider my mom to still be religious. I don't know if my dad is or not. But I'm sort of
Interesting that you don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, because we don't
Interesting.
really
So
we don't
have you
really
just
talk about
observed
it.
a little bit of a like sort of moving away from some of the rituals and like what would
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
used to pray and like they
Right.
did like the whole thing, the prayer, like the legit with the
Mhm.
stone and the beads and
Oh,
the
right.
book and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know if they did it like 5 or 6 times a day, but they and I was exposed to it and whatnot. But then over time, I just kind of saw it disappear a little bit over
Mhm.
time. And then for me, it was never really a thing that I've just found compelling. And
Mhm.
I don't know, and I think the biggest reason why, I don't know if this is like Hans and I briefly talked about this, and we still got to have that conversation, like Hans and I, because we need to get into like a deep dive religion discussion too at some point. And, you're more than welcome to join us too, Steven, if you'd like. But the thing that I'm really trying to figure out that I'm fighting through is like, okay, so I can tell that if I have purpose, if I have a guiding light that is that is 100% raw and honest and a thing that I can latch onto that says this is why you're here or this is why you're doing this, right? Life is a little bit easier because those hard moments, those difficult moments, those
Mm.
unsure moments, those vulnerable moments, you can kind of fall back on that and say,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
this is why I'm here, right? This is why I'm
Mhm.
doing this. And I don't know if maybe I'd love to hear you guys talk about this, especially. I mean, you two are perfect because I know you both come from very different backgrounds and you sort of experience this differently. But that's the one
Well,
thing
I
I'm
strongly agree with
realizing.
your sentiment, just to be clear.
Yeah,
I strongly agree. I think that if you have this belief system to fall back on, definitely easier, especially to deal with tragedy and challenges in life. Everything's here for a reason. This must be part of my purpose. God has a plan, that kind of stuff. And when you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, deaths in the family, these kind of things, mate, there's no argument. Having that belief system is going to make things much smoother than not. Definitely agree on that completely.
for sure. And so,
Can I pose
yeah,
a question to Stephen on like I think this is a great place to maybe try and find common ground on, what would you propose? I think this is one of the big struggles for like culture at large. We're going back to the kind of the idea of the religion shaped whole. Like I think that a shared my personal I think assessment at this point in time is that religion is a social technology that evolution has produced in order to create cohesive social groups that are much, much larger than even, Dunbar's number is able to support. And that
I'd
without
agree with that.
these systems, we don't have the ability to do society at, city scale, nation state scale, global scale. And so, but then that begs the question, if we're like, what are the transcendent set of compressed values that are worth a general audience, regardless of their background, pursuing as that purpose that Farzad is talking about? And how would you phrase that? How would you define it? And then how would you compress it so that it's easily communicatable to, a mass audience?
So I definitely agree with the sentiment there in terms of social cohesion. as I've said, I think most people have that religion-shaped hole, and I think especially historically, where they're not organized religions, I don't even know if we have civilization as it is today. That shared belief system and some of the community values, I think that's been very important, and it's still today for many people. Most people probably is quite important. The way that I would sort of distill my philosophy down in terms of just a belief system is actually just 3 words, and I think that it's probably applicable to most people, which is live, love, and matter. I think that's a great system for people to work with, and it doesn't have any unnecessary additions. But I think if you're out here to live, really to live your life is not, to fulfill your potential. That's really what that's getting at. And to love family, friends, neighbors. I mean, these are pretty common values in many of the world's religions. And to matter, whether that's being a mother and a great partner and raising a beautiful family, whether that's with your mission, your purpose, or a combination thereof. I think that's a really good overarching philosophy that's applicable to anyone who isn't a complete basket case. It's just to live, love, and matter. And I think that those guiding principles, you'll find a lot of those in many of the world's organized religions, but you don't need to believe any of the world's organized religions to have those values and be living by those principles.
I was just going to ask you, how do you take that, Farzad? Like, does that provide a jumping off point that, it seems like a foundation that is workable?
So my struggle with that. So in almost every situation, I can jive with that, right? I can say, I love my family, I love my wife, I love my child, I love my friends, I love my work, right? I love what I get to do every day. I'm very thankful. I'm really living in a place where I think I'm fulfilling my fullest potential. I don't know what that is yet. That's the journey that I'm on right now, which I'm very thankful for, right? And I'm trying to matter by building a legacy of sorts. Building things that
You do matter, Farzad. And I do mean
you.
that sincerely. You're having a very positive impact, sharing a lot of important conversations and really having an impact at scale. So that definitely, I can say from an outside perspective, you do matter.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's honestly very kind of you to say. But I think the thing where I'm trying to figure out, okay, so like there's been moments in my life where it's just dark. It's just dark. I don't know if it's chemical. I don't know. A lot of it is probably a combination of lack of sleep, high stress. There's stuff going on from a creative perspective that I feel like I'm not fulfilling. There might be challenges going on, so on and so forth. But like sometimes I'm like, I feel crushed, right? I feel crushed. And during those moments, and I always get past them because I think it's hard for me to look around where I am right now in my life and then take too long before I'm like, okay, like there's no point in feeling this way. Look at what you have, right? But then I look around and I'm like, but not everybody is nearly as lucky as I am, right? So I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, so like for folks that don't have that luck, where life is just kicking them in the ass, like just either because of their fault or because of where they, just the luck of the draw. And I'm like, okay, how do those people push through that? Because that seems.
I know the answer. Do you want to know the answer? It's gratitude. It's gratitude. Okay. It's an active practice of gratitude. Everyone has something that they can be grateful for. Actually, a lot of things they can be grateful for. You're alive, be grateful for that. You're alive at this particular time in human history, be grateful for that. You're able-bodied if you are, be grateful for that. There's so many things that people can be actively grateful for. And I think this is kind of the pillar on which those that live, love, matter really rests. At any point in life, no matter what's going on externally, you can always find a number of things to be actively grateful for. And if you can really have that perspective, take a step back and look at your life and think about all the things, maybe your parents are still both alive. You can be grateful for that. Give them a call, tell them you love them. Pro tip now, stop the video, go do that. Why wouldn't you? And so if you take a step back, no matter what's going on in terms of your external circumstances, you can always find things to be grateful for. Now, in fairness, I don't really have those moments of, feel like I'm getting crushed or whatever. I don't really relate to that very much. I have a very good sort of outlook, and I tend to be just off the charts, content and fulfilled. And in terms of happiness and well-being, I don't really struggle with my down days. And obviously, when shit's hitting the fan, obviously it's not a fun day, but I don't tend to go through those troughs. But I do really think that the secret is to have a very, very active practice of gratitude. Always find things that you can be grateful for. It can be the simplest stuff. Breathing clean air today, having a roof over your head. And I think that can alleviate a lot of that, feeling down, because it's an incredible time to be alive. The fact that we are alive, the fact that we're able to have these interesting conversations, there's a million different things that you can look at and go, I'm really grateful of all the times to be born. And even just imagine like half the people on earth, in fact, probably about 95% of the people on earth, I would not want to swap places with just geographically. Would you want to just randomly spin the wheel and suddenly end up, nah, fuck that, bro. The fact that we've been born and we're now in a situation in developed nations, we've got a lot of opportunity, it's fairly safe. There's so many things that you can think about to be grateful for. And I think that's the key. No matter what's going on in your life, you can always be grateful for so many things. And that really gives you perspective. And if that's not enough, go do some volunteer work in hospice care, end of life, and see people who are now terminally ill. Maybe that'll give you perspective and more reasons to be grateful for.
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of that. And I think, one of my definitely deeply held values is I think it's extremely important for us to be able to have highly functional pluralistic societies where, different people are allowed to believe in different things. I think this is, just my American heritage that freedom of religion really matters. And that includes, to believe in something specific or not to believe in something specific. But regardless of what you believe, to be able to live peaceably with your neighbors and get along. And I think that's incredibly important and a hard one. Even as you were saying, I wouldn't want to play the geographic roulette thing that you were talking about, but even more than that, I really wouldn't want to play the point in time roulette.
Oh, I know that's a whole other level, man. We are absolutely living at the best time in human history. And there's no question there. You have to be deranged to think otherwise. And that's one of the biggest things to be grateful for. If you just look back at history and what living conditions were like, the risk of death, disease, the lack of we're living in the best of times. And that's probably likely to be true indefinitely into the future as well. But if you think about all the humans who've ever lived, pick a year, since we were created or descended from the trees, however you interpret our past, we've been around for a long time. Think about every single year that could have been a human. This is definitely the best. And then it's no contest.
Let me ask you a quick question to Hans, and then we'll wrap it up. Could you ever picture yourself having your that lens without Christianity? Do you think Christianity is the thing that gives you that lens? How do you view your relationship to Christianity?
So I believe that if it wasn't for Jesus Christ specifically, his life, death, resurrection, the stories that are laid out in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I wouldn't be, if it was just the Bible sans Jesus, I would be out. I would be someone who's very, very deep into science and might play with, I think that there's a great combination between science and Buddhism, that those two, there's a lot of questions that science doesn't answer. And I think that if it wasn't for Jesus, the next best alternative that I can find would be Buddhism. So I could, I think it's very reasonable for people to be able to live lives that they feel like are meaningful and they feel satisfied in, that are, they're pointing their life at trying to understand objective reality as best they can and live in a way that benefits their neighbors as best they can. That said, when I, just the Bible is an incredible document. It's super complicated, super, super complicated. We don't have anything else like it in, the canon of existing literature, because it is a complete anthology that reaches back far. There are some other individual human origin meme stories from thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, the stories of Marduk and all sorts of other religions, but none of those ever attached to then a people in a culture that were able to proliferate through time and that actual story get built on top of with another story and on top of it with another story that is continuous from here back. Like Christianity is the only and Judaism are the only religions that have that sort of cultural history that goes back that far. And because of that, they're really the only two places where you really have to wrestle with the, like, how do you understand what the book of Genesis means when it was written down after having been passed from generation to generation to generation for thousands of years? Like, the nature of what the purpose of that story was is really almost impossible to comprehend for a modern reader. And like, who was the person who crafted that story originally? Who were they speaking to? Why did they provide that story to them specifically? So, like, all that to say, it's a very difficult text to wrestle with over time. But I think that, like, it's plain to me that Western society, which I happen to love, is in at least a very significant way a dialogue between the ideas and all the complicated ideas and the messy reality of human existence, which includes Darwinian evolution and a lot of brutal competition in a very harsh and hostile environment, which included a lot of killing and a lot of death for many, many, like that was, like we were talking about earlier, the time roulette thing. Like, all of that is something that happened, and we know that it happened. And so any sufficiently complex story that tries to attach to humans and then paint a picture of something that is perfect and like the perfect embodiment of love and sacrifice and peace in the face of, the most difficult things, it has to wrestle with the reality of the world as we see it. And so that's why, the Bible is brutally honest about that part of what it means to be human. And I think it is a superior, for me, form of finding meaning to what I see as the alternatives. But, the other factor that I will fully acknowledge is that I grew up in a household that my parents were Christians, and not only were they Christians, but they were willing to be missionaries to Africa. Like, they moved from the United States to Eastern Africa. And it wasn't like, Stanley Livingston, deepest, darkest heart of Africa kind of thing. But it was kind of crazy. And what I took away from that over time was like, my parents were authentic believers, and they really, even though like they were both had all kinds of baggage and very, very imperfect people. And so like I would see the mess of how imperfect they were, but also the courage to be obedient and go and really try to serve people on the other. And like, I have a lot of firsthand experience of seeing what it looks like to serve people who have nothing, and doing that specifically for the reason that you feel like God said, "Hey, lazy American, get off your butt and go over here to these people that I care about and do something to help them." And so that really colors my experience. Like, it's hard for me not to read that in to my life experience. And I'm firmly, convicted that these things are true, but that I also have never really, really deeply questioned them, just because I grew up in an environment where it was obvious to me that it was authentic.
That's a beautiful story. I mean, it really does seem like it has it's almost like an instruction manual for how to be a good human, but wrestling through a lot of different uh moments to arrive to those to that conclusion. Is that an accurate way of summarizing what you just said? But I don't know. It was just deep.
Yeah.
It was very deep what you just said. I'm still trying to process that.
I think that was definitely fair. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that would help to clarify it. Like it's just hard to communicate the, breadth of the meaning that's involved there in
Well,
a couple of
this is
minutes.
formative years of you as a person,
Oh,
seen from
definitely.
within your own family. It's not like formative years where you had a coach. Like this is you're in it, so obviously that's going to have a huge effect on the way you view the world and the strength of your belief, having seen firsthand. And I think also the example for your parents, it sounds like you saw almost the religion as a guiding light to help the best sort of come out of them as well, knowing that they're having their own struggles. So yeah, I can totally understand your perspective.
Oh, definitely. And that, I think that is another very significant piece for me is like I know my parents, and then I also know my uncles and aunts and my grandpa, my my grandparents, and like it was the Midwest. They had grandparents that came out of the Depression, and my grandfather was a World War II veteran who was a raging alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And the environment that my parents grew up in was awful. And most
Mm-hmm.
of my uncles and aunts really bore deep, deep scars. And,
Mm.
my dad definitely bore deep scars as well. But I felt like he, while still exhibiting a lot of the scars and struggles that his siblings did, fared better. And I think that
Mm.
the experiences that he had coming to faith were real. And he didn't, he was an LSD dropping hippie in the 70s, was not saved. And his experience coming out of that and going on a very long journey of trying to wrestle with all of those demons and come out on the other side. Someone who, was able to give his children, like, there were some things that were difficult about my childhood, but it was nothing compared to his. And so, like, I really feel like they succeeded in moving the ball down the field so far in
Mm-hmm.
their one life that they really stopped huge cycles of generational trauma.
Mm-hmm. I think
Wow.
that's what every parent's goal should be, is to do a slightly better job at minimum than their parents did, based on everything they've experienced and learned through the way. And it sounds like your parents in particular really made a big impact and a huge shift.
Beautiful story, Hans. Thank you for sharing. Any parting words, Stephen, Hans, before we wrap the sucker up?
Well, I do have a question. We had some dialogue on X recently. I want to know if there's any updates on your thoughts around RFK and the Trump administration. You seem to be
Oh,
battling. Is that,
yeah.
yeah? Have you got any updates, or you too
I'm
sensitive to
very
talk
I'm
about it?
battling. No, I think I am battling. I mean, I will tell you, like, my biggest struggle that I'm going through right now is, as a former Democrat, I have lost. So let me start from the standpoint that where I think that politics in general, the way I view politics right now, outside of a few players in that arena, it's a lot of lip service to try to serve a system that is
Mm-hmm.
very much a uniparty, which means that
Of
it's
course, of course.
controlled by military industrial complex, the pharmaceutical industrial complex. Just go down the list. The multiple ways that the government can make money. You're gonna have all these albatrosses that are gonna be latched on, and they're gonna try to extract as much taxpayer revenue as possible. Like I
Mm-hmm.
literally just learned a couple days ago that IRS has a union. The
Yeah,
IRS
that's the
has a union.
anti-endorsement of Kamala Harris. Imagine their goal to come out, and the IRS is a union. It's like a double whammy of vomit endorsing a political candidate. What are you guys doing? Are you trying to
It's
stop her winning? Like,
insane.
oh, geez, the
It's
IRS union endorsed her. But
it's like it
yeah,
I thought
I don't
about
know.
that deeply. I'm like, okay, so not even that deeply because it's pretty obvious. The body that collects the money from the taxpayer base, which then the government spends very inefficiently a part of that money goes to a union? Are you fucking kidding me? And what is that union there for? Anyway, and I'm not saying that. Listen, okay, so I'm getting off a train here because I'm gonna go on a rant. So let me go back to the original point. So I come from that perspective: is that our government is extremely inefficient. I don't think that the Republican or Democrats, and I think a lot of that is because of a two-party system that is beholden by special interests, lobbyists, and just we have been very. It's almost like I'm looking around and I feel like the last 40 years or even 20 years, we've all just been abusing this system and allowing these different bodies to just extract money from the taxpayer. Okay, so I'm like, okay, cool. So then I'm like, okay, who can fix that? Because that seems like a very daunting task, right? So the Democrats, the way I view them is that they have gaslit me personally way too much for me to trust them anymore. I just seen way too many different things from them, specifically around how they treated Andrew Yang during the 2020 cycle that really turned me off. Just the amount of times they're caught in lies left, right, and center that really turns me off. It kind of like opened my eyes to just how much politics is just a game. And they'll just say whatever, right? And I'm not so convinced that Republicans are that much better. I think where Trump has an edge over the rest of the game is that he presents himself as a hammer, and within this political cycle there are people whom I respect who have a track record of actually serving the public for good, aka RFK Jr. with all his stuff he did through through his time. He did legit, he cleaned up the Hudson River. I mean, that itself is like, okay, you are a hero. Okay,
yes.
Elon Musk, he speaks for himself, right? So, and these people have said, this guy is the guy that we can latch onto to do it, right? So that gives a little bit of a boost to Trump. But what I can't get past is like when I just watch him talk, I just can't connect with the guy. And this is like a very primal, primitive way of thinking about it. I completely like I will say like, yes, it is. I am emotionally driven to dislike the person because I'm viewing a guy who's 78 years old in front of a microphone who's just talking shit, and it's very entertaining and all that stuff, but he's just talking shit, right? And then I'm like, okay, so you are the guy that's supposed to be president of the United States? That doesn't feel right to me, right? I'm like, yeah, Elon Musk endorsed you.
Right to you, yes.
It's feel. It's totally a feel. And I know you have a superpower to separate the feeling from
#autism. Yes,
exactly.
Have you seen Gad Saad describe getting drunk off the smell of the cork?
No.
That's you right now. He describes this as, I think it's a Lebanese saying, translating, and rather than actually consuming the substance, the wine, and getting drunk from that, you smell the cork, you see drunk, and that's the response, which you're acknowledging now. You're getting drunk by smelling the cork, which is Trump's personality, the way he comes across, and acknowledging that rather than the substance, looking at his track record for 4 years as president of the United States, what policies he implemented, his results, the congruence between what he said he was going to do as he campaigned and then his actions in office, which were really closely aligned, and saying, and itself admittedly, I don't like the way that, the cork smells. So getting drunk off that is quite interesting because you mentioned Washington sort of being a machine and I think Trump's core strength is he's an outsider. He doesn't need the money. He's not in it for personal gain. And people will argue, he's a narcissist. He wants to be president. Bro, do you really think the guy who's a multi-billionaire, great lifestyle, loving family, do you really think that he wants to put himself in harm's way, be attacked relentlessly, have his character and at the tail end of his life after a successful career? Trump is genuinely trying to have a positive impact on the United States. And that's quite obvious if you do put the feelings aside. You may not like the personality, obviously, and the style, but you can look at the track record, his comments historically going back to the 80s where he was talking about other countries ripping the US off with trade, and definitely have to understand that he's not from within that machine that you're referring to about the Union Party. And that's why I think he's being attacked so relentlessly, because the Union Party, the machine, feels threatened by that outsider coming in, the hammer, I agree with that, and actually doing that. Yeah.
So I agree with that. But so let me push back on track record. The whole thing he ran on in 2016 was drain the swamp. The swamp is worse. So what happened there?
Actually, his biggest campaign promise was to build the wall and then the southern border.
But
That'll be my
the drain the
interpretation.
swamp was a huge thing, Stephen. Like drain the swamp was I'm going to come in, I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to get rid of the deep state. I'm going to, and I get it. Like that's probably harder than he thought. I get it.
Oh,
But that's also track record. But that's also track record, right? So it's like, okay, so like the benefit of the doubt I give him is like, okay, in 2024, you're partnering with better players that can do that. RFK, Tulsi, Elon, et cetera. Go down the list. A bunch of other, you're pulling from the Democrats to say, hey, let's form this unity sort of ticket to try and fix shit, right? But if he wasn't able to do it in 2016, that's also part of his track record, right? So like, I don't want to diminish that.
He's acknowledged this, and he's also talked to this point. You may not have seen this, but he's been quite clear when he first came into the office. He was taking recommendations for people in roles from others because you have to nominate hundreds of people. You have to have some degree of trust in the people around you advising you who should be in this particular role. And he acknowledged at the time he was an outsider. He didn't really know the people. He didn't have the experience, so he didn't know who to put in roles, and he made a lot of mistakes, which he's acknowledged. This time around will be quite different because he has that experience and he does know now some of the people that previously were a faceless swamp creature, and he now knows, okay, that person's incompetent, they're a moron. And I think you do have to take into account on net, what were his campaign promises? What was his track record? Not, well, there was one thing that he aimed to do and he campaigned on. He wasn't able to completely execute on that. You have to look net. He campaigned quite strongly on a thriving economy, job creation, wage growth, a lot of economic prosperity, and also stopping countries ripping off the United States, which he did. He got a lot of money out of a lot of foreign entities. There were the Abraham Accords, peace agreement in the Middle East.
North Korea, South Korea.
Wars.
A lot of good stuff.
You've got to look at that net and say, look, I may not like the smell of the cork, but the track record is there. He's not perfect. No one's going to be perfect, right? You make a prediction or a promise on what you intend on doing. Nobody's going to be completely flawless in doing that. It's like Elon Musk, right? He's trying to deliver autonomy. It's not on time. He'll probably get there. And I think the second time around for Donald Trump, he's going to have a much greater opportunity to do his best to drain the swamp. In addition to that, there's the conversations with Musk about the Government Efficiency Commission, right? The Department of Government Efficiency. This is no joke. This is not in his best interest from a personal safety point of view. And I think this is a clear intent from Trump that he really does want to do his best to, quote, drain the swamp here and get rid of a huge amount of government waste. And he's tapped Elon Musk. Of all the people, who else would be a better candidate to actually do that? And I think it's an interesting signal that you mentioned people like Elon Musk and Donald Trump and RFK now combining, all with a fairly common mission of trying to improve government efficiency and have a positive impact on the United States. The last question I want to ask you now is, given the fact that RFK has endorsed Donald Trump quite strongly, he's on the record now in repeated interviews saying that Trump's very serious. We've been getting a huge list of names and people we're going to put together to address the issue with health, chemicals in food, the environment, and so on. Do you trust RFK's judgment that he believes Trump is genuine in his intent to implement RFK's policies? Because RFK's on the record saying that all of these previous supporters, he strongly encourages them to vote for Trump so he can actually implement the policies. Or are you still at a point where you're undecided, even though you were a big supporter of RFK, partially maybe because of the third party, not just the policies, but the idea of a third party candidate? Yes. Or are you still, well, I don't trust that Trump actually intends on implementing his policies, or are we still in the kind of drunk off the cork situation? Because it's quite interesting to talk about this, because I know that you're battling between two things. From my perspective, like, bro, you're talking about he's got a great track record, but I'm interested to see where the thought process is at the moment.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I mean, I think RFK endorsing Trump helps, but he's still, this is where I'm still stuck, right? So I wanted RFK as president, not Trump, right? So
I feel like RFK as president,
because he is in my opinion, and this is a trust issue for me. I find it easier for me to trust a person who is working on matters to try and save harm from people and living creatures versus a real estate guy from New York. It's so that's one layer. But let me
have a much bigger, deeper trust for RFK is the first point.
For sure. For sure.
Okay, right.
For sure. Yeah. And so I think him endorsing Trump kind of says, well, if this guy wants to do that, if I have the trust on this guy, let's say, and he's endorsing Trump, then by default, that means that the person that I trust, I should also trust their judgment because I trust them, right?
Yes.
But the one thing, but the one thing that I can't get past is like, okay, but even if that was true, I want RFK as president, not Trump. Okay. Yes. I want RFK as president. I want him to lead the country, not Trump. And then the second thing is, and sort of this is like a opinion that I have, and I'm curious to hear your take on this. So Trump is 78 years old and not healthy. Like, why are we saying that this person is actually fit to be president? Like, he does it look like a healthy guy?
Why would you say he's not
you?
healthy? I mean, he's overweight, but what's giving you the indication that he's not healthy?
He's overweight when he's 78 years old.
Yeah, where are you
Isn't that by
getting the idea that he's
definition?
not healthy, though?
I mean, isn't that by definition somebody that could suffer from some sort of heart attack or health issue at that
Certainly
age?
Possible, but you'd have to look
Yeah.
at blood work and CAC scans to see his arteries and actually whether or not he's in good health condition. It's impossible to know. Obviously, it'd be better if he was in great condition and not overweight.
Mhm.
But I would look at his levels of energy and vitality and his cognition, and I don't see any outward signs as an issue. Obviously, he could have a heart attack, drop dead tomorrow. That could be true of anyone. You can't quite judge a book on its cover, but yeah, I don't see any external signs that would give me great concern. I think that there's some people genetically who have quite a high level of energy, vitality. I think Elon Musk is another example. Just look at his dad, and he's quite old now and still very vigorous and energetic, who may not have the best health habits, who still have plenty of ticker. Now, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to put it on the record now. I reckon Trump lives to about 97 years old, continues to be overweight, and, continues to be fairly sharp until the last few years there. He seems to be, when you hear the guy speak and how quickly he's able to recall numbers, I think cognitively he's fine. Physical body, hard to know. But the fact that he has this unlimited energy where he's doing multiple interviews every single day, over and over and over and over and over, and still remaining sharp, that to me is a very strong sign of good health. Obviously, it'd be preferable if he was like 40 years old as opposed to pushing 80. But I don't really see any outward signs that he's not in a good state of health, other than him being obese. But that in and of itself isn't there's plenty of people that, live a very long, healthy life, despite the fact that they're carrying around plenty of blood.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, there was this one study that I saw is like there's this village in Italy that's like people just drink wine and eat pasta 24/7. Like, just the average of basically, like, everyone's fat, but they all live to be like 95 because they're happy.
Yeah.
They're enjoying life, So I totally get, listen, I think, one thing you do very well, Stephen, is that you are very good at presenting facts, and you're very persuasive in your assessment of
cutting through your
this
emotions.
situation. Yes, yeah, you can separate your emotions very well. I don't have that skill, right? But I still can't get past.
That's
I can do it to a certain extent, but I don't know. I can't explain it. It's just, I think maybe I'm being stubborn. Maybe I think so. I know what I want. I know what I want, and I'm not. I don't feel comfortable at this present time.
There's that word again, feel. Yes.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting
for sure. 100%. 100%. It's just I'm being honest. I'm being honest about how I feel. To be complete. And I think what's even crazier is that I think most people vote this way. Most people vote this way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No question
For
about that. So the final question then, just to lay it out, do you believe there'd be a material difference between a Kamala Harris president and a Donald Trump president in the next 4 years for things that affect you personally, the future of your child, and the American people in general? Do you think there's a meaningful difference, or you say, I can't really tell, either outcome was probably going to be comparable based on what I know? That's the real question I have for you is, do you look at Kamala Harris as a president, Donald Trump as a president, and think, the outcome, not really going to make a difference either way on whatever you think is personally meaningful? Or is it a point where your feeling toward Trump and the smell of the wine cork is so overpowering that you're willing to acknowledge that a Trump presidency may be better overall, or maybe worse? Let us know. But you still don't feel comfortable him being president, even though you sort of weigh up and go, well, overall, it's probably better for a Trump president. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get at, where you're at with the thing.
That's a great question. Yeah. I think that a Trump presidency would be better than a Kamala presidency. I feel, I think so.
Yep.
But again, what I'm trying to get over,
hear, but please elaborate.
Well, what I'm trying to get over is, like, why do we have to vote this way? This is the hurdle that I'm incapable of, and I don't know if it's because this could be because of my time at Tesla, because I've seen how to actually fix shit that's difficult, right? And I don't feel like that is the guy that is meant to do that, and that is the hurdle that I'm trying to get past.
So
is like, go ahead.
Would you vote differently if you were in a swing state? Like, does that factor? Like, would you feel the exact same way and have the same plan if you lived in Ohio as you do in Texas?
That's a
Or
great question. That's a great question because that's a really good question. And this is the fucked up nature of our system in a way, but that it really comes down to like 6 states. It comes down to like 500,000 people, maybe a little bit more, but it's about 1 million people dictate the fate of the United States, truly, because, 44 states will vote either red or blue, and there's 99.9% certainty that they'll vote that way. I think it's very much, I think it's very likely that if I lived in Ohio or I lived in any other place, look at this fucking guy, he's smiling. He's smirking. It could definitely add a forcing function that says, okay, but your vote actually matters. And this is the system that you have. And so this is the way you have to vote. Because this is just this is what I've been fighting with the last few months, is accepting the system. It's a system. This thing that we're in right now is a system. And I know how imperfect it is, and I know how ugly it is, and I know how fake it can be. And this shit doesn't sit well with me. I don't care if it's Elon or RFK endorsing these guys. The fucking system doesn't sit well with me. I do not like this system. And so that is the hurdle I have to jump through. That I view what's wrong with everything. And I'm like, okay, but I still need to vote the system. I either have to vote for this guy or that guy.
Yeah.
I hate that, Steven. I fucking hate that.
So let me just summarize through an analogy what you've just said. You're at a restaurant and they only serve 2 meals. They serve pizza and steak, and you're banging the table saying, "I want pasta."
Wrong.
And you're gonna starve.
Wrong. They serve dog shit and cat shit.
Yeah. Okay. Dog shit and cat shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're banging the table saying, "I want something different."
No, I don't want to be in the restaurant. I'm going to leave the restaurant and go somewhere else. Right. That's the alternative I'm in right now. It's like, okay, so maybe I just don't eat dog shit or cat shit. That's how I view the system. So what I'm trying to figure out through Trump.
You can't generally make that point though, because you've already acknowledged that you believe a Trump presidency would be better than a Kamala presidency. So the analogy between dog shit and cat shit doesn't quite hold.
Of course it does.
A really terrible meal and a slightly less terrible meal.
On a scale of 0 to 100, we're talking about from 0 to 2. Okay. So technically it's better, but it doesn't fit my standard of what I want this system to be. It's 100% being stubborn about not accepting the system. Okay. And number 2 is I just do not like Trump. I do not like Trump. This is what it comes down to, 100%. And there are variables.
What is it about Trump you don't like? Because I hear this often from people, and I'm curious what it is about him that you don't like.
I don't think being a successful real estate guy in New York means that you have good ethics.
Yeah, but what have you seen to suggest he doesn't have good ethics? What are the... Because that's not like a... What have you actually seen to substantiate that?
It's a feeling thing, Stephen. I keep telling you, these are just like feelings that I have.
I'm curious because... Surely you must have seen some examples of poor ethics that have given you that impression, right? Because otherwise,
of course not. Of course not. Just in the same way that I don't trust Kamala Harris because I feel like her views are extreme, right?
But I think that you can make a case for Kamala Harris not being trustworthy because she's quite evasive when she's asked direct questions within the media, and she has suddenly on a dime completely 180'd on many of her firm policies. She's on the record saying, this is absolutely my position, blah, blah, blah. And a few years later, there's the 180. And when questioned why the 180, instead of answering the question directly, there's evasiveness. So she's showing a lot of red flags about trustworthiness. But I'm curious, surely there must have been something from Trump with ethics that you've heard, maybe business things or something that would give you that impression, right? It can't just be a feeling. You must have seen something. I mean,
you know, like the lawfare stuff that he's going through, the lawsuits for sure, right? But that's not a valid. Okay, I totally get your points, Stephen. I totally 100% get your points. What you're saying, okay, you're acting out of feelings in a lot of these things, and I 100% agree.
Just trying to find where the feelings came from, because this is an interesting.
I told you, he's a real estate guy from New York, right?
Yeah.
And having lived in the States and having been in New York City multiple times and having talked to guys from New York, okay? Like, you got to be a little shady to make it work in that place, okay? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, you got to make, especially if you're going to make that much money, you got to fucking be connected, okay? But, okay, so that's like a lot of people. And what I designate as shady, right, Maybe that's just how business is done. Okay. That's if you don't do that, you don't succeed. Okay. So you are 100% correct that I have a visceral emotion, a negative one. Some might even call it TDS, Stephen.
Yes. I think you have a mild case of TDS.
I have a mild case of TDS.
It's not
and a lot
severe.
of that
it's mild.
And a lot of that could
I don't know if it's terminal either. I'm not sure.
Definitely not terminal.
I'm not sure. No. Okay.
And
good. All right.
And I will concede that it could have been one. It definitely festered from a period of time in my life where I absorbed a giant amount of left-leaning media that told me that this individual is going to be the most racist, most craziest person of all time. And when I lived through his presidency, I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. Okay. So that was like the beginning of like so I'm being told lies, right? But what I'm being resistant to is that I don't want that awakening to all of a sudden be an automatic endorsement. And so that's and this is just a journey that I'm going through right now. You know, listen, November 6th, we could be talking about like, hey, I voted for Trump. Okay. Yeah. This could be an outcome.
There's still hope.
This could be an outcome. But listen, my vote doesn't matter in fucking Texas anyway, because he's going to win. It's going to go
everyone's
Trump anyway.
Vote does matter. And I would never say that, even though obviously Texas, typically the result is pretty close to certain, but it's not certain. And I do think one final point is that the media and the polls are creating a very different perception to the reality. For people who don't understand how these polls work, you get a random call in the evening when you're home from work from an unknown number. Not everyone's going to pick that call up. And you'll often find the same pollsters calling the same people year after year after year. So unless the methodology is extremely randomized, you don't generally get a good view of consensus opinion. And you'll see this. Go look at what the polls were saying for Trump, Hillary, back in 2016. Enough said. And I also think the media is trying to paint the picture that the race is a lot tighter than it is. But I give some homework to people watching. If you watch maybe a dozen of the street interviews that people are putting on YouTube, where they're asking people in swing states and deep blue and deep red states, how are you voting? Why are you voting this way? It appears to me that there is a much larger amount of support for Donald Trump than the perception, even in some of the states that you think there's no way. And I think Trump himself personally thinks there's a chance he could win New York, which would be almost unfathomable. But it's possible. So I don't think you make a fair point, but I don't think it's a good mindset to say, well, my vote doesn't matter. And then for that to be a reason why you wouldn't cast a vote or just you opt out, even if you don't think it does matter. I always think it's worth making your voice heard if you have a strong opinion regardless.
So I meant that comment more in like a passive jest, like that it doesn't matter because the outcome is there. Like the bigger reason why I wouldn't vote is because, again, it goes back to my thing where it's like and this is like the journey I've gone through as being a father, where I've actually like dug deep into the system that we're in, are the way we elect a candidate, what has happened historically with these parties, how it's really controlled by special interests and lobbyist groups. Like that shit just has me so pissed off, right? And so so that is the thing that I also have to like navigate through, and then. Once I go through that, then at that point, either accept it and I'm like, okay, this is how we make it better by selecting one or the other, and hopefully we'll get to a point where it gets better, right?
Yeah.
Or I'll just be like, well, a lot of people in America, surprisingly, like this is what a lot of people don't understand. Half the country is independent. Like Republicans and Democrats drive all the conversations. They are the other half. So the majority 100%. Party are independents, and a lot of people don't vote. Because they're like, what the fuck is this, right?
Yep.
So it's like the decision I have to make is like, okay, can I actually do my part to help fix it? And is the right way to fix it by voting the system, right? And I need to be sold. I have to continue to be sold by an individual that says, I am not the system. I am here to be the actual hammer. Trump makes a compelling case. But I have to get through my human instinct that I have, the feeling that that's somebody I can actually trust to do that. Right? So
and the trust is still hinged on his real estate development background primarily.
That's one of the big factors. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the big factors. Yeah. But listen. I'm being honest, man. That's kind of how my head works.
Yeah, no, well, it's a good insight. I think it'll be interesting to read the comments from the video and the discussion and see what people think.
Stephen Mark Ryan just exposed Farzad for having TDS. Look at this fucking idiot.
So, I mean, I'm not saying no comment, no comment. But I do think this is helpful because many people watching will be in your shoes at some point along that same journey. They've been a Democrat previously in terms of their voting. They have a visceral,
there's a lot of me's out there.
That's what I mean. And so that's why I'm asking these questions, not so much for you directly, but as a catalyst for other people to kind of understand what their perspective is, where their thinking's coming from. Because it's a fascinating thing for me to, obviously being super autistic, I'm much more logical than most people. And just to see from a different perspective and understand the thinking process and the journey that you're on. Because in short, to summarize, I mean, you're on the record now. You do think a Trump presidency would be better overall, but you have a sort of emotional, visceral reaction to the style, not the substance so much, but the actual style of the guy, and have some challenges being able to trust the guy, despite the fact that there is a 4-year track record of him as president and fairly close alignment with policy promises versus results. And then you can also see the contrast between a Biden/Harris administration over the last 4 years versus Trump presidency. So I think it's going to be informative for many people in the audience just to see the thinking process.
Yeah. And the system. And again, let's not forget, he's a Republican. It's a Republican ticket, right? That's another factor for me that's very important.
Yes. Well, I will be on the record. Well, for at least the next few decades, I don't see an independent third-party candidate being elected in the US. It's just, it's par for the course that you ultimately do end up with a two-party system in most nations, because otherwise votes end up spread too thin, and people eventually go, you know what, I've got a much better chance aligning with one of the two parties than trying to be independent. It's just going to keep happening. I don't see a solution to that. It's not ideal. I completely agree. You basically do have a uniparty, and an outsider like Trump or anybody, it's helpful, but it doesn't solve the problem. I mean, I don't see that changing. It'd be nice. Like if we lived in La La Land where we could just wave a magic wand, it'd be great if there'd be like 15 different candidates next time around, all with great policies and a very different perspective, not controlled by the machine and the vested interests. But I don't see that being likely.
I have a hard time giving up La La Land. That's my problem right now.
There we go. That's the summary. I think you said it
really
well.
is. Well, and I'll be honest.
That was really insightful. Like no shit. That was actually, you said it perfectly. Yeah.
There is, I mean, a little bit more to that though, in the fact that RFK is still going to be on the ballot in
correct
a lot of the states that are not swing states. And
however, he did request to be removed completely, and he's directing all of his voters to vote Trump, even in the states that aren't swing states.
Okay, that's a new piece of information for me. Last I knew was when he said that, if you're in a non-swing state and you'd like to vote for me, go ahead.
Yeah, he's on the record very strongly telling everybody, if you were previously going to vote for me, if you're in a state that isn't a swing state regardless, don't. Please vote for Donald Trump. That's the best chance that I have of implementing my policies around health and environment. So he's very strongly said, and the reason this has happened is because of the lawfare. He literally can't remove himself from some of these. And he's like, fuck this. These guys are trying to, first they wouldn't let him get on the ballot, and now they won't let him get off the ballot.
Crazy.
And so he's realized that his best possible chance is to urge all of his supporters, no matter who they are, swing state or not, to vote RFK. Because the alternative is the chance of a Kamala Harris presidency, and he does not want to take that risk. And he understands that Trump does seem sincere in wanting to implement his policies. Trump, obviously not himself a beacon of health, but he does understand how important this is. And there's a very strong alignment with many of the core values between RFK and Trump, that those two who strongly disagreed on things in the past. I mean, there's a funny story where RFK Jr. literally was suing Donald Trump. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but he was suing Donald Trump. He wanted to build a golf course somewhere, and he's like, nah, environmental issues. And RFK Jr.'s wife literally organized a flight on one of Trump's planes and told him, and he's like, you didn't know I'm suing him, right? And he goes, yeah, he knows you're suing him. He doesn't care. You guys can hitch a ride. So they have a very interesting working relationship where the strong disagreement. RFK has literally sued the guy. By the way, he won. So he sued and won, prevented Trump on one of his real estate projects. But they're still willing to put that stuff aside and say the values matter, and this mission is so important, making America healthy again, that we're willing to put those less important disagreements aside. And so you guys definitely, I recommend RFK's endorsement of Trump now, he's urging all of his supporters to vote Trump because that's the best way for him to fulfill his mission. So glad I was able to give that update because maybe not everybody has seen that. But yeah, you can watch that over the last few weeks. He's been very firm on that.
It's all of this is very compelling. This is the battle that I'm going through, is that these are all very compelling reasons to vote for a Trump presidency. The other thing too is like it's a big mission. I love big missions. I mean, all of us love big missions, like existential things. Like there is this movement towards like identifying these existential huge missions for humanity to try and get after it. And I think what's interesting about the Trump presidency is that, especially now paired up with an Elon and an RFK, who are both masters of setting a grand vision and working towards it, both of them are now saying that's our guy. That's very compelling. It is very, very compelling. I'll give you that for sure.
I would say it's definitely close to a dream team at this point. You've also got Vivek, you've got Tulsi Gabbard as well, and a number of people who seem to be coming from the right place for the right reasons, all sort of coalescing into this one unified front to try and make a positive impact. I think it's going to be a really great administration if Trump does end up winning. And
then Dick Cheney endorsing Kamala is like the worst thing.
Except for the IRS union. That's even worse for her.
That one's almost as bad. Yeah. Sorry, Hans, you were going to say something.
I was going to say that actually does change the calculus for me because I was planning to vote for RFK specifically because I thought that, if there's a strong contingent of people in non-swing states who are going to vote for him, then it does move us one step further. It's his message, but also just support for that third party candidate possibility. The closer that we get to having a viable third candidate each time, then maybe one of these times it can break through. And I really think that would be important. But if he's urging all of his supporters not to vote for him, then we're not going to get close this time. And so it's kind of a pointless gesture. And I'm strongly in the camp that the bloated regulatory state that we've got going on is an existential threat to like an actual existential threat to democracy.
Yes.
What democracy not being, the institutions of democracy, but democracy being the government of the people, by the people, for the people republic that we have. And so, I think that actually does change my intent. I've been telling people that I don't intend to vote for Trump, but I may have to go back on that.
Well, I do recommend watch the clips of RFK in his own words, hear his reasoning. I do, however, I do want to give some credit to RFK Jr., right? The guy has put his personal ambition and ego aside here. Because think about the decision he had to make in firmly instructing his supporters, don't vote for me. He cares more about his mission than his own personal ego gratification, because it would have been amazing to see the results of independent voters for RFK. And he's like, you know what, the mission matters more. And I believe that the Trump administration is going to help me fulfill that. And I'm deeply concerned about a Kamala Harris president. So, but do check out the source material and see what he had to say in his own words and hear his case.
Yeah.
I think that was his appeal to begin with, was that I think anyone who looked at him and had an understanding of who he was and his background understood that, this is not necessarily he's not trying to be the reincarnation of JFK. He was doing this because he really felt like he had to do it. And even though he knew it was going to come at great personal cost, and he was willing to do it anyways.
Yeah. And I think
about how different things could have been if he was the Democrat nominee. If he had been embraced by the Democrat Party, think he would have won for sure. Or actually, maybe not for sure, but I think he would have had a much better chance of becoming president than Trump does now if he had run as a Democrat. Much more moderate, reasonable, anti-war, anti-insane, anti-woke. That's all you needed to do, because he would have got almost all of the moderate Democrats and many Republicans as well, and then all of the independents. I think the Democrats really fumbled the football, but you know why? Because he's not part of the machine, so they couldn't allow it.
Yeah, he's not the uniparty.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so if like, and maybe this is like, I know you got to go, Steven. So it's like
take the time. I'm enjoying the conversation.
You sure? Okay.
It's a good TDS therapy session. I'm just gonna pat. That was good, man.
Oh man. So on the flip side,
I am enjoying it a lot.
No, so am I. I appreciate that. on the flip side, I think the thing that really,
Hmm.
like another thing that really bugs me about this cycle is that the Democratic Party is so obviously the system party. It's so obvious that they are
It's
the
crazy to
system.
flip too, right?
It has
Because
totally.
it used to be the total opposite in the 90s. Like, fuck you, won't do what you
Yeah.
tell me, was the left
The
leaning.
2000s.
And now it's
Yeah,
literally fuck you, do what they tell you.
Yeah.
It's crazy to have seen. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of previous Democrat voters have kind of been clinging on, because they're still attached to the ideals that used to be the Democrat Party
Yeah.
that have suddenly flipped, and there's some cognitive dissonance where they're not acknowledging the complete flip, because it's now like pro-war, it's anti-freedom,
Yes.
pro-censorship. It's like, what's going on?
And this is another one of my variables that's really painful for me, because it's like I consider myself like the definition of a liberal, right? Like the
Mhm.
definition of what a liberal would be, I guess. I don't even know if that's true, but I just the traditional liberal party, the Democrats in the United States, connected more with the ideals that they painted to who I am as a person and what I want out of the world. But the deeper I go into it, I'm like, these motherfuckers are literally the fucking opposite. They're literally
Yes.
the opposite. It drives me
Yes.
insane. So then I have to
Mhm.
shed that. So I have to go through that trauma. I have to
Ham it up. I love
shed
this.
that,
Yeah.
right? I have
Yeah.
to shed that.
Mhm.
And then I have
Mhm.
to become comfortable with the idea of supporting the side which that side told me is the devil. But they're
Mhm.
actually exhibiting a lot more of what they are saying they would do,
Oh yeah.
right? But they're
Yep.
actually doing it, right?
Yeah,
And that is
that's
like
the whole 180, which is just mind blowing to me.
brutal.
It's been a complete
Yeah.
flip. It's crazy to see, right? A couple of decades
Yeah.
ago, right, the Republicans are the party of war, and now you've got the main candidate saying he wants to end this war on day one, and the morons in the media like, so who do you want to win the war? And he's like, I want people to stop dying. You fuckwit. I want to end the war.
Yeah.
So, you're totally on point here. This flip is crazy. Carry on, but I just wanted to emphasize it's wild to have seen this happen in just a decade, maybe.
It's
Not even.
insane. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
100% right. And so that's another thing that's like, it's like it's adding fuel to the fire for me to say, okay, so is it a vote against the Democrat Party, or is it a vote for the Republicans, right? Because that's the other thing I'm battling through is that
Trump
if we think
is
about
definitely not what the Republicans
traditionally are.
were.
Yeah,
Absolutely
So-
true. Yeah.
Yeah, those are different things.
for sure.
That's true.
100%.
Yeah.
But the one thing, the one trap that I'm also trying to prevent myself from falling into is that if I view back 2016 and 2020, the Democrats' entire proposition was just not Trump, right?
Yes.
Not Trump, vote for Hillary. Not Trump, vote for Biden, right?
Mm-hmm.
The trap I don't want to fall into myself is not Kamala, Trump, right? And so like in the same token, I think there is a little bit of that going on too, out there in the whatever in the zeitgeist, where yes, there are definitely 100% agree. I do think a Harris administration has some pretty insane flaws. The party that will propose unrealized gains tax is crazy. Like the fact that you would
dumbest
even
policy proposal I've ever heard said out loud. How could you say that out loud?
It's insane. It's
The
completely
only
insane.
people who would think that's a good idea are university students in liberal universities, like in certain parts of the United States, who haven't finished graduating. That that's a great idea. Tax the rich, billionaires are bad. Nobody with a brain looks at that and go, hang on, you're telling me you're going to tax people on unrealized gains, meaning business owners are going to have to sell a huge stake in a company. How are they going to pay for that? They're going to have to sell, and that's going to go to a huge corporation. Investors who have assets, what if they come down? Do you get paid back? It's brain dead. It's the dumbest economic policy I've ever heard. And the fact that that was uttered out loud is just mind-blowing.
Insane. Yeah.
It's not that I disagree with it being an investor. It's just, it would cause a cataclysmic explosion in the US economy.
Yeah. Even
Which
if
is
you're
the
putting
world's
it out,
reserve currency and would have cataclysmic global consequences.
yeah, just a fundamental lack of like, and so like part of me is like, okay, so like, are they putting out there, are they putting this out there as like a as like a haggling thing that they can put out there. It's like, well, okay, we'll roll that back, but you have to give us this, right? But I'm like, there's no way. Like you can't put a proposal out there that is that on its face so ridiculous and then try to claim it as something that you're going to try to haggle with when you're trying to get policy pushed through. So that example is like, okay, so there are definitely things about the current Democrat administration that are just so insane that it also says, okay, so what are the other things that they're going to try to push through that are along those lines? That has me concerned, right? But again, the trap that I'm trying to not fall into is like, well, you should vote for the other person because that other person should not be in office. Like that to me doesn't sit well. So how do you guys analyze that? Like, do you think it's a good reason to not to vote for the other person because the other person you don't like nearly as much, or you think the other person is going to be catastrophic for the nation? How do you guys rationalize that?
You first, Hans.
I was going to say I can give you Steven's position, who has the track record that matches what they have, what did they say they were going to do? What did they actually do? And do those two things line up? I think there are a number of points that I would critique Trump on that have been touched on here already. I think he was ineffective, but he tried to do most of the things that he wanted to do. I wish that he was a lot better at not being a stooge of the Israeli government. I think that's one area where he falls down, and I'm not a huge fan of the way that the Abraham Accords really are in much better service of Israeli interests than American interests, in my opinion. But that said, like, that's like a nitpicky thing that I have around Trump, where I have major red flags and major concerns around another, I think looking at Kamala is a pointless endeavor. She is not there. It is, yes, she like the reason that she is the nominee instead of RFK Jr. is because she's a puppet and the machine is going to machine, and that machine scares me. And so that is where I say 100%, like if I'm presented with a choice between the machine and Trump and now the Justice League of, all of those people, I'm huge fans of. RFK Jr., Tulsi, like I would vote for any Vivek, like I would vote for any of those people for president. And if all of those people are aligning around, let's go in and let's start to defang the machine, 100%.
Yep, totally agree on that point. And to Farzad's point, there's definitely an element of some people not wanting to vote one way or another, like anything but Trump. But in the case of Kamala, there are very, very clear red flags in her historical comments, the complete 180s on many positions, her absolute ineptitude when she was leading the US rural broadband project, not a single home connected, in charge of the border, millions of people flooding through. She's demonstrated ineptitude. She's historically had positions that are now the polar opposite of what she's saying on the record. If that's not a red flag, or maybe she changed her mind on literally everything, but she hasn't been questioned. So what was it that caused you to change your mind on this? She's parading an endless line of red flags. Whereas you can look at what Trump's done and say, look, I don't agree with everything. Some of his results were perfect. Nobody's perfect. But there is a track record there. And I think that most people who are shifting toward Trump aren't doing so because anything but Kamala. They're going, well, a lot of red flags there. Distrust some of her track record. Policies are kind of insane, like US taxpayers paying for transgender illegal immigrants who are in prison to get sex changes. What? You said that, you idiot? And so a lot of people, I think, aren't necessarily supporting Trump because it's anything but Kamala, but they're looking at Trump going, he's got a good track record policy. I agree with many of the most important things. But it's definitely true that many people who are supportive of Kamala, anything but Trump. And again, I encourage you guys, watch some of these street interviews. When people are asked, and obviously it could be very specific editing. People, when they talk about Trump, they talk about policy. They want a secure border. They want safe cities. They want economic prosperity. These are the main things you hear over and over and over. And many of these people will say, look, previously I voted Democrat, but we've had 4 years of that. It was better under Trump. You ask people in these same interviews in the same regions, why are you voting for Kamala? They will say, she's a woman. She's a person of color. Anyone but Trump. It's a completely different set of principles guiding most people's decision to vote for Kamala versus Trump. There's definitely anything but Trump for many of the Kamala supporters, but you're not seeing that in reverse. And many people who are acknowledging they want to vote for Trump are actually saying, I do not like the guy's personality, grab him by the pussy, this kind of stuff. That bothers me a lot. But his policies are on point. His track record's solid. So even though I personally have this visceral reaction to the guy, I still prefer the policy. And this is something that I do encourage you guys. If you want to see what people are thinking, these street interviews are amazingly insightful. Yeah. You watch enough of them, you see the same stuff over and over and over. And then you also hear, why are you voting for Kamala? Trump's a racist. Any examples of what? Trump's a racist. Any examples? I got to go. That's also how many of these street interviews end. So there's a lot of media propaganda that's caused people to have this reaction to Trump. So it's quite telling. So back to your point, Farzad, I don't think there's too many people that are, I'll vote Trump because Kamala's the worst. It's more, Kamala's got a lot of red flags, and I've seen a track record here with Trump that I can kind of, foresee in the future. He's likely to do more of the same.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, I can tell you as a former Democrat, a lot of it's vibes. You vote based on vibes, right?
Yes.
That's just a factual statement. And I think, and I don't know if this might be an overgeneralization, but I think the one thing that I saw that I feel like is one of the defining factors traditionally for like the Democrats and the Republicans is that I feel like Democrats, because of how it has been, the legacy definition of a Democrat, which is more liberal, it's more for human rights, it's more about like advancing
social
humanity
causes
forward,
and
social causes.
Yep.
So nice, by default,
nice, pretty feels vibes. Yeah.
But by default, those people, I believe, are more empathetic. They have more empathy, right?
Yes.
And what the Democratic Party has done brilliantly with the legacy media, they weaponize the fuck
100%
out of 100%,
empathy. Bro.
Yep. Yeah. They do that on both sides.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And this is why
I think it's much more extreme on the left, but it does happen both ways. Yeah.
This is where I feel the most, like when I tell you about being gaslit and I feel just very dismayed by the Democrats, it's because once I came to that realization that my empathy for my fellow humans was being weaponized so that they can gain power, I was like, fuck you. I had such a visceral reaction to that once I realized that was what was going on. And I think that's why I feel the way that I feel, is because once I realized, I'm like, you guys, like, I can't believe how low you guys would go for a fucking vote. And then when I look, okay, so then why you want the vote? Oh shit, okay, because you can actually make money. You can gain power. You can create a network, right? You can kind of fulfill your own destiny of being like a powerful person in this machine that you've just accepted to be the thing that you're going to use as your vessel to fulfill the thing that you're trying to do, even though it's obvious that that vessel is imperfect as fuck. And it can be weaponized to literally kill people for companies to make more money. Like, how can you live with yourself? Right. And that's where I get so fucking upset. Now, I don't know, like Hans's point is, I actually want to hear him talk about this a little bit because, okay, so that's probably true on the Republican side. I wasn't exposed to it. Right. But then I think about it, it's like, okay, so this is the system we're supporting, right? And that it goes back in a circle. So go ahead, Hans. I know you probably want to say something.
The point I was going to make on doing it on both sides isn't necessarily that it's about compassion or empathy. Like empathy is more. It's not that Republicans aren't empathetic people. Sometimes they're empathetic about different things, but I would say the strong core value of the left would be more empathy, and the stronger core value of the right would be duty or patriotism. And they parasitize both of those things. And so this is how they feed the war machine, is with the people who are very honor and duty bound and feel very patriotic. They send those people off to go be hamburger in the war machine. And then the feeling gaslit, like the thing that you're describing, is the feeling that many veterans go through when they come home and they realize that they were gaslit into killing people, watching their comrades die in combat, their brothers and sisters in arms, for bullshit.
Yep.
And so they come home, and this is the mental health struggle that causes so many of them to commit suicide. And so that's the really strong version of that on the right. On the left, it's, hey, the homeless crisis is it. We care about these homeless people. So what do? We created a set of incentives that creates people shooting up on the street in mass in San Francisco and LA.
Yep. You nailed it. And I think one great example of the patriotic Americans being swindled, J.D. Vance, current vice presidential for Trump, right? J.D. said, I was very patriotic after the 9/11 attacks. I wanted to go do something for my country. I get back and that was a fucking waste of time. The fact that he's willing to say that and he's changed his mind, and that was weaponized empathy there. Like, he thought he was doing the right thing, really believed in his country. He ends up getting home and realizing that was a complete waste. So, yeah, I think you nailed it.
Yeah, and this is what I'm hoping is the great awakening of the times, is that more U.S. citizens are agreeing that the system that we're in, the incentive for the system is to weaponize empathy and patriotism. So those people in power can either retain it or gain additional power for whatever they want to do. And they're leveraging us and pitting us against each other and weaponizing our kindness so that they can get more power and money. Okay?
Yeah. And don't forget the role of the media in
100%.
propagandizing. Without the media, this doesn't happen. But if the media is on board, suddenly everybody in the general public who's being told the one true narrative from the media, that's the conduit through which, the machine weaponizes empathy and patriotism. It's the media. Putin bad, 100%. Putin bad, Ukraine good, let's go to war. Next minute, by the way, spoiler alert, the only way this ends is negotiated peace. Russia taking some territory and just a bunch of bodies between now and then. Been saying it since day one. Everyone lost their minds. It's still going to happen that way. But what's being told to the general public, Putin bad, Ukraine good, keep sending money, people dying. As long as I'm not dying, I don't care. War. Ends the same way. And this is a great example of empathy being weaponized right now. And a lot of patriotism as well, because a lot of people, Putin bad, Russia enemy of the United States. But it's only going to end the same way. And this is one of many examples. There are bodies piling up. The youth of Ukraine and Russia all dying, and it's going to end up the same way. And the people making these decisions to keep funding and providing weapons, they're not thinking, well, my body's not on the line, my life's not on the line, so who cares? Just keep the machine going on. One of many examples, which kind of sums up both empathy and the patriotism kind of being weaponized. For what? And without the media telling people Putin bad, Ukraine good, keep fighting, this wouldn't be happening.
Yep. You used the word system earlier, Farzad, but it really is the uniparty. Like, it is that Democratic Republican coalition of Dick Cheney and Kamala Harris
100%.
that is the thing that is using that weaponized values against normal everyday people. And like, whatever you have to say about Trump, I don't think he's weaponizing people's feelings of, compassion or patriotism or honor or empathy in order to really undermine their own interests.
That's I think I agree with that. He definitely seems to be doing what he believes is in the best interest of the public. Not trying to weaponize empathy, but he wants secure, safe cities, economic prosperity, American, dominance. Seems pretty evident.
Thank you, Stephen. This was a tremendous conversation. 2.5 hours.
It was good. Time flies when you're having fun / a therapy session.
The title for this video. TDS sufferer. We try to fix the TDS stuff. I mean, dude, it really is. I will 100% admit it. Like, there's definitely a level of that. And it's like, it really speaks to how pervasive and how powerful propaganda can be. Totally.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it exists.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And it exists.
It's amazing to see the self-awareness too. It's like it's like one of the quantum superposition where you're simultaneously like in, but
Schrodinger's
also out.
Farzad.
Yeah, he's both got TDS, but also acknowledges he has TDS. How is that possible?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's just the human emotion that I can't, that I struggle to sift through. And I think it is a proxy for how most people behave. And that's the
you're definitely
biggest,
right. Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest bit of insight that I've gained through this like entire, just from the very second of like saying, maybe Trump, definitely not
Hmm.
Kamala, is like, okay, wow. So if I'm going through this journey, how many people are going through this journey? Right. And like,
Mm.
and then how
Yeah.
many people are stuck in a way of thinking because they don't have either the time or the guts to look outside the system that they're being, like the propaganda system that they're in,
Mm.
to challenge their
Mm.
own beliefs, because that's uncomfortable as
Yep.
fuck.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it
That's right.
sucks. It sucks. So
Hmm.
it just, and so my ultimate hope is that at some point in the near future, we have this great awakening where the masses can, I don't know, and maybe they are there, they're just silent. But a lot
Mm.
of people are going to vote for Kamala Harris, and I think there is a range of how well intentioned or well informed those people are. But I just don't see how anybody who is like, the only people that would vote for her, in my opinion, think that the system is good. Like the system, like this is as good as it's
Yeah.
gonna get, and she'll
Yeah.
make it better, and you just have to deal with it. And
Well, I think you've touched on
yeah.
an important point here. I saw some interesting analysis the other day. The only segment of people in the United States who majority vote Democrat are single women. Single
Mm.
men, married women, all on average vote more Republican than Democrat. And there's also a subset of men who are extremely low testosterone type of soy boy, basically women who are walking around in men's bodies. And I don't mean that in a derogatory. I'm just saying there's some guys that they're basically a girl in a boy's, but there's also women that are basically a guy in a girl's body. And it seems possible that you're talking about the government here and the machine is that many people who, in the case of the single women, don't have that protector and provider as a partner are looking to the government to protect and provide for them. So you get a lot more of the socialist type of policies, and the government, it's their job to look after me. And so a lot of people are making the decision because they want more government, more control, more censorship, more. Govern me harder, daddy. And that seems to be a major portion of the mindset of people that are leaning toward Kamala is they want more government. They want more government intervention, more government controls. They hate the idea of free speech. Oh no, what if somebody has an opinion I don't like? Please protect me from that terrible opinion. So I think you did touch onto something there. It seems to me, at least with this election, that on average, people skewing towards Kamala on average want more government intervention, more government control, more government, just more, as opposed to people favoring Trump, which is just stay the fuck out of my life, leave me alone, government. The least possible government, the better. Oh, and there was one other reason I forgot to mention as to why many people in these street interviews want to actually vote for Kamala, which is crazy to me. But basically, as I mentioned on my post on X, I'll tone it down a little bit for the YouTube video. But a lot of people who just want to have a one night stand from a Tinder date and then an abortion a few months later, that's another key reason why people women's reproductive rights, as they describe it. That is the only policy related decision that people were bringing up as to why they'd want to vote for Kamala. Women's reproductive rights. So, yeah, guess government getting involved on average. And yeah, anyway, I think it's a good place to wrap up, but I do want to throw that in there as the last
have
reason for
one
many of the supporters. Yeah.
quick follow-up question
Yeah.
for you, Stephen, on this, that, and maybe if we want to, we can cut this part out if it doesn't add to the conversation, but how much do you think, for the people who are struggling with, I don't want to vote for Trump, how much of it just boils down to the very, like, evolutionary social psychology element of people like me don't vote for him or people like him?
Yeah, well, there's definitely an
those
element
group
of that.
dynamics.
Yeah, because I mean, we're seeing a sudden shift. Finally, people feel comfortable to wear a MAGA hat in certain cities, whereas a few months ago, 6 months ago, that was unheard of. So there's definitely a very strong pull socially, especially in thought bubbles, where all you're hearing from people is Orange Man bad, even though there's a subset of people that disagree, but they're too scared to say anything. So your perception is everyone thinks the same way. And that's a really strong sort of social forcing factor that's not only guiding a lot of people's decision, but their willingness to say something out loud. Yeah. Until we're starting to see a shift. Musk has endorsed Trump and many other people in prominent positions now, where previously you wouldn't have seen that. But more and more people, the MAGA hats are a very interesting thing, particularly after Trump got shot. The next day, suddenly, people who previously were silently supportive of Trump, living in bubbles where 90+% of people, orange man bad, he's the devil, threat to democracy, well, like, fuck it, I'm over it. This guy just got shot at, I'm done. Wearing the MAGA hat around. And then that caused more people to feel comfortable as well. There's a very strong social dynamic among people who are identifying with their group. And well, everyone else here, orange man bad. So if I disagree, I don't want to say that. But a lot of people, they're not even having that thought process. They just agree because everyone around them agrees. Ross Gerber, great example. Shout out to Ross. Yes, I name dropped on purpose. This guy lives in a TDS bubble times infinity. And he cannot fathom anybody on earth not agreeing with his social circle. Now, I don't know whether or not Ross has formed his own opinions here, or it's just
You
such
mean
a
the
strong
P. Diddy social circle?
Yes. Wait, what? No, definitely never. That's an interesting side note, that one. It's going to be very interesting indeed. By the way, quick note on that. What is it with all these people that everyone knows and no one says anything until it comes out? I don't understand. People see things happening and they just don't mention it, and then suddenly it all comes to light years later. Every single Hollywood actress knew Harvey Weinstein was a total creeper, but they all wanted to advance their career and didn't say shit. I don't understand that. P. Diddy's around too.
I mean, I think it's the whole notion of, social dynamics, and once you have a couple people step up and finally talk the inconvenient truth that could have personal repercussions. Once you have a little bit of bravery, then the group follows.
It's
right?
contagious. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that was my thought too. Courage is contagious thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely
okay.
true.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I'm gonna end recording here, and yeah, dude. Oh wait, plug your shit. Where can people find you?
No, I don't need. Don't worry. It's all good.
Solving the Money Problem, fucking on X, YouTube. He'll say no, but that's where you're gonna go. We'll put links in the description in the comments. Bye.
Bye.